The room grows quiet before anyone notices why. A porcelain teacup rests untouched. The fire burns low. Somewhere behind lace curtains and heavy velvet drapes, a woman exhales, slowly, deeply, as a warm sweetness spreads through her veins. It is not wine. It is not scandal. It is medicine, poured drop by drop from a dark glass bottle, prescribed by a trusted physician, approved by society, and taken without shame. In the Gilded Age, addiction did not arrive screaming. It arrived softly, perfumed, wrapped in silk and etiquette. This was an age obsessed with appearances. Women were expected to endure pain silently. Childbirth, grief, loneliness, nerves, expectation itself. And opium offered relief without rebellion. Laudanum soothed headaches, calmed hysteria, softened sorrow. It quieted the mind while leaving the body upright and presentable. No one called it dependence. No one asked how many drops had become too many. High society did not fall into addiction. It drifted into it gracefully behind closed doors. Before we go further, take a moment to subscribe and stay with me. These are stories history rarely tells out loud, whispered truths, hidden rituals, and lives slowly fading behind respectable smiles. And tell me where you're listening from tonight. Because beneath the chandeliers and beneath the corsets, something darker was taking hold. A secret crisis unfolding in parlors, bedrooms, and doctors' offices. This is the Gilded Age's opium crisis, the silent addiction of high society women and the chemical comfort that learned to masquerade as care. It begins without drama, without warning, without the sharp edges one expects of ruin. It begins quietly, as most respectable things do. The bottle sits on the vanity like a promise. Dark glass, thick and reassuring, its label written in looping script that suggests care rather than danger. It shares space with perfume bottles, hairpins, ivory brushes worn smooth by years of ritual. Nothing about it appears urgent. Nothing about it suggests it will change a life. It is simply there, waiting, as natural a presence as powder or rouge. Outside, the Gilded Age moves with confidence. Carriages roll over polished streets. Parlors glow with gaslight. Wealth announces itself in marble staircases and imported silks. This is an era convinced of its own progress, its mastery over nature, its faith in modern science. And within that faith, medicine has taken on a new authority, one spoken softly, without question. The woman who reaches for the bottle does not think of herself as ill. She thinks of herself as tired. Her head aches in a way that lingers just behind the eyes. Her sleep comes lightly, easily broken. Her nerves, as the doctors say, are delicate. She has been told this often enough that it has become truth. Pain, anxiety, sorrow. These are not failures of endurance, but conditions to be managed. And management, in this age, arrives in measured drops. Laudanum is not introduced as indulgence. It is introduced as kindness. A physician once stood in this room, hat in hand, voice gentle, explaining the benefits with practiced ease. Opium, dissolved in alcohol, refined, controlled. Perfectly safe when taken as directed. It would calm the nerves, ease the pains, restore balance. He spoke of the female constitution as though it were a fragile instrument, prone to imbalance, requiring careful tuning. She listened, grateful for explanation, relieved that her discomfort had a name and a remedy. No one warned her that relief can teach the body to ask for more. The first dose brings warmth, not intoxication, nothing so crude, but a smoothing of edges. The world softens, thoughts slow. The tightness in the chest loosens its grip. It feels like rest, like permission to finally exhale. The bottle is returned to its place among the perfumes, indistinguishable from them in purpose, to make life more bearable, more presentable. Days pass, then weeks. The bottle remains. It becomes part of routine, folded neatly into the architecture of daily life, a few drops before bed, a few more after a trying afternoon. The reasons accumulate easily. A headache, a restless night, a visitor who stayed too long, a letter that stirred memories better left untouched. Each use feels justified. Each use feels earned. No one counts the drops closely. There is no reason to. This is medicine, after all. In polite society, suffering is expected to be discreet. Women are praised for endurance, for composure, for the ability to absorb discomfort without complaint. Laudanum offers a way to meet those expectations gracefully. It allows pain to be managed without protest, sorrow to be softened without spectacle. It does not demand attention. It does not disrupt appearances. In this, it is perfectly suited to its time. The bottle listens. It waits. It never refuses. What no one sees, what no one thinks to look for, is the subtle shift taking place beneath silk sleeves and practiced smiles. The body remembers the relief. It anticipates it. What was once occasional becomes necessary, not through desire, but through quiet adjustment. Chemistry replaces resilience. Dependence grows without language, without accusation. And so the bottle remains on the vanity, unremarkable, unquestioned, respectable. This is how it begins, not in desperation, not in excess, but in comfort, in trust, in silence. The prescription arrives folded neatly, as everything important does in this world, inked with authority, signed with confidence, delivered without urgency. It is not framed as a risk, nor even as a choice. It is presented as inevitability, a correction, a small intervention meant to restore what nature, temperament, or womanhood itself has apparently misaligned. The physician speaks in low tones, respectful, paternal. He does not rush. He asks polite questions that never quite reach the heart of things. Sleep, he inquires. Appetite, palpitations, tears that arrive without warning. The answers are measured, modest, shaped by years of being told what is reasonable to admit. He nods knowingly. He has seen this before. He always has. Nerves, he explains. It is a word that carries no blame and no cure. A word elastic enough to stretch across headaches and grief, restlessness and despair. Nerves explain everything while revealing nothing. They justify intervention without demanding understanding. And so, for nerves, he offers calm, distilled, bottled, dependable. Laudanum, he says, as though naming a trusted friend. He explains the dosage carefully, with the solemnity of ritual. 10 drops, perhaps 15, diluted in water or wine, taken in the evening or when agitation threatens to overwhelm. He assures her it is safe, widely used, prescribed to ladies of refinement across the city. He may even mention Queen Victoria herself, invoking reassurance through royalty. Science has refined it. Civilization has improved it. This is not the crude opium of foreign dens and whispered vice. This is medicine. There is comfort in his certainty. The physician leaves behind more than a prescription. He leaves permission. Permission to rest, to retreat, to soften. Permission to rely on something external rather than summon strength from a body that has already given so much. The calm he prescribes is not merely chemical. It is social, moral, sanctioned. In this age, medical authority carries enormous weight. Doctors speak not only to bodies, but to expectations. They affirm what a woman is told from childhood, that she is delicate, that her system is finely tuned, that strain is dangerous, and endurance admirable only up to a point. Pain, when borne too long, is unbecoming. Laudanum offers a way to manage it quietly. And quiet matters. A woman who suffers openly disrupts the harmony of her surroundings. She invites concern, speculation, inconvenience. But a woman who medicates discreetly remains agreeable. She can host dinners. She can smile through conversation. She can appear composed even as her inner world dulls and drifts. The calm prescribed by physicians aligns perfectly with society's demands. The bottle becomes an extension of the doctor's voice. His reassurance echoes each time it is uncorked. This is treatment. This is care. This is necessary. What goes unspoken, what is not yet understood or not yet convenient to understand, is how the body responds to this borrowed calm. The relief is real, unmistakable. It teaches the nerves what silence feels like. It teaches the mind that peace can be summoned, not earned. And once learned, the lesson does not fade easily. If the calm falters, the solution is simple. Adjust the dose. The physician does not hesitate. He has been trained to treat symptoms, not patterns. If 10 drops no longer suffice, 15 will. If 15 fail, 20 may succeed. There is no alarm in this escalation. It is framed as responsiveness, attentiveness, good practice. The calm must be maintained, so the prescription renews itself, quietly, indefinitely. Each visit reinforces the cycle. Each assurance smooths over doubt. The woman trusts the man who speaks with confidence and carries the weight of science behind him. She trusts the system that has always known better than she does what her body requires. And thus, calm becomes something prescribed rather than felt, administered rather than lived. It settles into daily life with the same inevitability as corsets and calling cards. No one calls it dependency. No one calls it danger. It is simply calm, authorized, approved, and endlessly renewed. The diagnosis comes long before the suffering is understood. In medical texts and drawing room conversations alike, the female body is spoken of as a thing perpetually on the brink, sensitive, impressionable, prone to imbalance. It is described in metaphors rather than measurements, as though it were a climate rather than a structure. Doctors write of excitability, of weakness, of systems too finely strung for the pressures of modern life. And when women falter beneath those pressures, the explanation is already waiting. Nerves. The word is elegant in its vagueness. It offers sympathy without responsibility, authority without clarity. Nerves can mean headaches that linger for days, or palpitations that arrive without warning. They can explain sleeplessness, melancholy, irritability, faintness, trembling hands. They can even explain grief that refuses to fade. With a single term, a wide range of human experience is folded neatly into something manageable, something treatable. Vapors follow close behind. Once a poetic description of rising mists, the term becomes medical shorthand for emotional disturbance. Sudden tears, breathlessness, dizziness, moments of dissociation that leave a woman staring through conversation rather than participating in it. Vapors excuse these episodes without challenging their source. They allow distress to be acknowledged while remaining safely abstract. The female body in this framework is not reacting to its environment. It is betraying its nature. Industrial cities expand. Expectations tighten. Women are asked to perform endurance daily, through childbirth, through illness, through social obligation, through private griefs that must never breach decorum. Yet medicine does not ask how much a body can bear. It asks how best to quiet it when it protests. Medical journals of the period speak earnestly of female constitution. Women, they say, are governed by their nerves more than men. Their systems are delicate, easily overstimulated, prone to collapse under strain. Education, travel, emotional excitement, these are all suspected of exhausting feminine vitality. The solution is rarely structural change, it is sedation. Laudanum fits perfectly into this worldview. It does not challenge the diagnosis, it affirms it. It soothes nerves rather than questioning why they are frayed. It suppresses symptoms while preserving the idea that the female body is inherently unstable. Relief becomes proof of correctness. If the drops calm her, then clearly calm was what she lacked. No one pauses to ask whether silence is health. Women internalize this language quickly. They learn to describe their suffering in acceptable terms. They speak of nerves instead of despair, of vapors instead of panic, of weakness instead of exhaustion. The vocabulary shapes not only how doctors respond, but how women understand themselves. Pain becomes identity. Fragility becomes expectation. In this way, medicine does more than prescribe. It instructs. A woman who feels overwhelmed does not think first of injustice or confinement or relentless demand. She thinks of imbalance, of something wrong within her. She reaches for the bottle not as an escape, but as correction. To refuse would be irresponsible. To endure without aid would be unnecessary. The body, meanwhile, learns its own lessons. Opium does not discriminate between physical and emotional pain. It quiets both with equal efficiency. Muscles loosen, thoughts soften. The urgency of feeling recedes. For a time, the woman feels aligned with expectations again, calm, composed, agreeable. The medicine works not because it heals, but because it restores functionality within the narrow boundaries allowed. What remains unspoken is how often these diagnoses serve convenience. A calm woman is easier to manage, easier to dismiss, easier to admire. Medicine that produces calm is therefore praised, repeated, refined. The fact that it dulls vitality along with pain is seen as acceptable, even desirable. Excess feeling has never been encouraged in women of standing, and so nerves and vapors become less about health and more about control, of bodies, of emotions, of visibility. The female body is framed as the problem, and opium becomes the solution, offered gently, persistently, without end. In this language, there is no room for protest, only treatment. By the time it reaches the teacup, laudanum has lost any hint of danger. It no longer arrives cloaked in medical urgency or solemn instruction. It slips instead into ritual, into habit, into the soft architecture of the afternoon. The hour itself invites it. When the day sags under its own weight, when conversation thins, when the mind wanders too easily toward thoughts best discouraged, tea is poured, biscuits are arranged, and somewhere between civility and fatigue, the bottle appears. No one announces it. A few drops vanish into porcelain as discreetly as sugar. The spoon stirs. The liquid darkens only slightly, imperceptible to the casual eye. The smell of bergamot and steam overwhelms the faint medicinal sweetness. What remains is warmth, familiar, expected. This is not secrecy. It is normalization. Afternoon tea is a social performance, a space where women gather without supervision, without the formalities that govern evening engagements. It is here, amid lace cuffs and murmured confidences, that habits are shared most easily. Someone mentions a restless night. Another admits to nerves that refuse to settle. The solution is offered gently, almost kindly. Just a little, one says. It helps so much. Laudanum moves from bottle to cup without ceremony, without shame. The genius of its acceptance lies in its setting. Tea has always been associated with moderation, with respectability, with controlled pleasure. To combine opium with tea is to disguise indulgence as restraint. The act feels safe because everything around it is safe. The cups are fine china, the room is orderly, the women are respectable. No one imagines addiction unfolding here. Conversation drifts, laughter arrives more easily. The sharpness of thought dulls just enough to feel pleasant. Complaints soften, then fade. The world seems less demanding, less insistent. This is not intoxication, they tell themselves. It is composure. It is calm, restored through civilized means. And because it works, it repeats. The afternoon becomes its own justification. A difficult morning earns a few drops. A social obligation endured without protest merits reward. Over time, the distinction between medicine and comfort dissolves entirely. Laudanum no longer responds to pain alone, it anticipates it. What begins as occasional becomes customary. In drawing rooms across the city, similar scenes unfold. Bottles pass between friends with the same casual intimacy as recipes or remedies. No one counts the frequency. No one tracks the escalation. The language remains gentle. It helps. It settles the nerves. It makes the day manageable. Doctors, when mentioned, are invoked as reassurance rather than restraint. My physician recommends it. Mine as well. The authority travels with the bottle, even when the bottle moves far beyond its original purpose. This is how dependence embeds itself, through trust, through repetition, through shared experience. Addiction does not need isolation when it has companionship. It does not need darkness when it thrives in gaslit rooms. Outside, society praises these women for their composure. They are attentive hostesses, gracious listeners, paragons of calm. No one notices the slight delay before speech, the softened reactions, the way emotions seem muffled rather than mastered. These are interpreted as virtues, signs of refinement. The cost remains invisible. The body adapts quietly. What once required a few drops now requires more to achieve the same gentle hush. But this change feels internal, private, manageable. Another spoonful of sugar, another careful pour. The ritual absorbs the escalation without comment. Tea ends, cups are cleared, the bottle returns to its place. By evening, the calm may waver. By night, sleep may still resist. But the lesson has been learned, relief can be summoned. It does not require struggle or endurance. It requires only preparation. Laudanum has become part of the day's rhythm, as predictable as meals and manners. It does not disrupt life. It smooths it. And in smoothing it, it erases the small warnings that might have once provoked concern. In this way, the crisis advances, not through excess, not through rebellion, but through etiquette, through afternoons that drift gently into dependency, one polite cup at a time. Grief, in polite society, is expected to behave itself. It is permitted an entrance, black fabric, lowered eyes, a suitable interval of withdrawal, but it must not linger too long. Mourning is allowed to mark a woman, but never to overtake her. Tears may be indulged briefly. Despair must be managed. The living have obligations, and grief that refuses to soften becomes an inconvenience. When sorrow stretches beyond its acceptable span, medicine intervenes. The loss may be recent or distant. A husband taken suddenly by illness, a child who never drew breath, a parent whose absence rearranges the architecture of memory, or grief of a quieter kind, the erosion of hope, the narrowing of possibility, the dull ache of a life lived according to rules that offer little room for relief. Whatever its origin, sorrow unsettles the nerves, and unsettled nerves require attention. The physician listens with solemn sympathy. He does not challenge the grief. He does not explore it. He acknowledges its existence only long enough to frame it as strain upon the system. Excess feeling, he explains gently, can exhaust the constitution. Sleeplessness weakens the body. Persistent sadness invites collapse. The mind, he suggests, must be protected from itself. And so he offers laudanum, not as escape, but as mercy. The drops are framed as temporary, a bridge over the worst of it, just until the nights grow easier, just until the heart steadies. Grief, like pain, is treated as something to be softened rather than endured. The expectation is not healing, but quiet. The first dose feels like a kindness. The sharp edges of memory blur. The constant pressure behind the eyes eases. Thoughts slow enough to rest. The world grows less insistent. For a woman drowning in sorrow, this relief feels miraculous, not because it erases loss, but because it dulls the agony of its presence. Sleep returns, heavy and dreamless. Family members are grateful. Friends remark on her improved appearance. She seems calmer, they say, more herself. No one asks what that calm costs. No one questions whether absence of pain is the same as recovery. Grief becomes manageable, then invisible. What laudanum offers is not forgetting, but distance. The loss remains, but it no longer demands attention. Emotions surface faintly as though filtered through layers of glass. Tears do not come easily. Neither does anger, nor longing, nor protest. The chemical hush spreads evenly, flattening peaks and valleys alike. In this state, grief behaves. It does not interrupt conversation. It does not disturb sleep. It does not make demands of the living. And because it works, it continues. The dose increases gradually, without alarm. A little more when anniversaries approach. A little more when loneliness sharpens. The physician reassures her that sorrow can return if treatment is withdrawn too quickly. Better to proceed carefully, better not to stir what has been so successfully quieted. Over time, the distinction between grief and dependence dissolves. The body learns that sorrow without sedation feels unbearable. The mind grows wary of feeling too much. The bottle becomes less a remedy for loss and more a barrier against it. What no one acknowledges is what grief is meant to do. In another world, sorrow might demand change, of circumstance, of expectation, of environment. It might expose injustices quietly endured. It might insist on rest, on care, on reimagining a life reshaped by loss. But laudanum bypasses this reckoning entirely. It allows grief to be survived without being understood. The woman resumes her place in society. She wears her mourning as prescribed. She fulfills her duties. She smiles when expected. All the while, sorrow remains suspended beneath the surface, neither resolved nor released. And so grief is cured, not by healing, but by sedation, not by time, but by chemistry. The pain does not disappear. It is simply rendered inaudible. In this way, Laudanum becomes one of society's most effective tools. It keeps sorrow contained, it preserves appearances, it allows life to proceed uninterrupted, and it ensures that grief, once medicated, will always require medicine to remain silent. Respectability depends on measurement. In this world, excess is not defined by quantity alone, but by visibility. What is seen is judged, what remains discreet is forgiven. And so the dose becomes the line between propriety and disgrace, carefully drawn, quietly adjusted, rarely questioned. Laudanum is not taken in gulps. It is not chased or hidden or hurried. It is counted. Drops fall one by one from the bottle's narrow mouth, each marked by a soft, deliberate pause. 10, 12, perhaps 15. The act feels controlled, even virtuous. Precision suggests responsibility. Control suggests safety. This is not indulgence, this is management. Doctors reinforce this belief with careful language. They speak of moderation, of individualized constitutions, of bodies that require different calibrations. A dose that suits one woman may not suffice for another. Sensitivity varies, tolerance develops. Adjustment is not failure, it is prudence, and so the respectable dose grows. No one announces the change. It happens quietly, almost organically. The original amount no longer brings the same relief. Sleep remains elusive. The nerves stir sooner than expected. The calm fades too quickly. These are not seen as warnings. They are interpreted as signals, evidence that the body's needs have evolved. The solution is obvious. Another drop, then another. The respectability of the dose lies not in its size, but in its intention. It is taken for the right reasons. Pain, restlessness, fatigue, emotional strain. The language remains clinical, even when the motivation has shifted. Relief is framed as necessity, not desire. And because the bottle was introduced by authority, its continued use inherits that authority. The physician may not be present, but his approval lingers. His voice echoes in memory. As directed, as needed. Do not exceed what feels necessary. What feels necessary, however, changes. The body adapts faster than the conscience. It learns the contours of relief, the precise moment when the warmth settles in. It begins to anticipate the hush, to crave the soft landing it provides. This craving does not announce itself as hunger or compulsion. It masquerades as logic. I will take it now, so the evening passes smoothly. I will take a little more, so sleep comes quickly. I will take it before discomfort arrives, so it never has the chance. This is foresight, not dependence, or so it seems. Society rewards this kind of self-regulation. A woman who maintains her composure is praised. One who falters risks scrutiny. The respectable dose ensures stability. It prevents scenes. It keeps emotion within acceptable bounds. In this way, laudanum becomes not merely a medicine, but a tool of social maintenance. The signs of escalation remain subtle. A bottle empties sooner than expected. Refills are requested more frequently. The chemist does not object. Demand is steady. Prescriptions are routine. No ledger tracks consumption with concern. Commerce moves smoothly. Where conscience hesitates, even when unease flickers, when a woman notices her hand shaking slightly without the drops, or feels a sudden hollow anxiety between doses, it is quickly rationalized. Nerves, she tells herself, a symptom, not a cause. Proof that the medicine is still needed. The respectable dose thus performs a quiet magic. It transforms dependency into diligence. It frames reliance as responsibility. It allows a woman to believe she is in control, even as control narrows. And because everything about the ritual is gentle, measured drops, clean glass, familiar reassurance, it never feels dangerous. There are no dramatic moments of excess, no public collapses, no obvious transgressions. Addiction does not announce itself. It adjusts itself. By the time the dose becomes indispensable, it has long since ceased to feel excessive. It is simply respectable. Pain in this age is not an event. It is a condition. It arrives early and stays late, woven into the fabric of womanhood so tightly that it is rarely named as suffering at all. It is expected, anticipated, quietly endured. From the first tightening of stays in the morning to the final extinguishing of lamps at night, the female body is asked to contain discomfort with grace. Childbirth is the most obvious demand, though hardly the only one. It is spoken of in reverent tones, framed as destiny rather than trauma. The agony is acknowledged, even praised, but never questioned. Pain is proof of purpose. Relief, when offered, is carefully rationed, just enough to quiet screams, never enough to challenge the idea that endurance itself is virtuous. Between births, there are other pains. Monthly cycles that leave women pale and unsteady, chronic aches that settle into joints and spines worn by years of posture and restraint. Surgical procedures performed without adequate anesthesia, because pain is considered instructive, even corrective. Emotional suffering layered atop physical strain, treated as weakness rather than consequence. To protest is unbecoming. A woman who complains too loudly risks being labeled hysterical, unstable, unfit. Pain must therefore be managed discreetly, transformed into something invisible. Laudanum offers precisely this transformation. It does not eliminate pain entirely. It muffles it, blurs its edges, makes it possible to continue. The relief it provides feels practical, even dutiful. A woman who dulls her pain can fulfill her obligations. She can host, attend, care, endure. She can move through her days without drawing attention to herself. This is not selfishness. It is compliance. Doctors encourage this compliance without malice. They understand pain as an obstacle to function, not a signal of harm. If pain interferes with duty, it must be softened. Laudanum is prescribed not to restore health, but to preserve productivity. In this way, suffering becomes manageable without being addressed. The bottle allows a woman to meet expectations without protest. She does not need to ask for rest. She does not need to negotiate boundaries. She simply quiets the body and proceeds. Over time, this becomes the preferred solution, not only because it works, but because it requires nothing from anyone else. Pain teaches the body limits. Laudanum teaches it to ignore them. The body learns to accept discomfort as baseline and relief as intervention. The absence of pain becomes conditional, dependent on chemistry rather than circumstance. What might once have demanded change, less strain, more care, fewer demands, is now handled privately, internally, silently. There's a subtle pride in this endurance. Women speak of managing their pains, of remaining composed despite difficulty. Laudanum becomes part of this self-image, a quiet ally in maintaining strength. To rely on it feels less like surrender and more like strategy. But strategies have consequences. The body, repeatedly denied the chance to express distress, grows confused. Signals blur. Pain that should prompt rest is overridden. Injuries linger. Fatigue deepens. The medicine smooths the symptoms while the underlying strain accumulates, unnoticed, untreated. Still, protest remains impossible. To stop the medicine would invite pain back into the open, and with it, questions that cannot be easily answered. Why does it hurt so much? Why is endurance no longer possible? Why can the body no longer cope? Better, then, to continue. Better to remain calm. Better to keep pain contained, even if containment requires increasing effort. Laudanum becomes not just relief, but permission. The permission to feel less, to protest less, to endure more than should ever be asked. In this way, pain is not conquered, it is pacified, and the silence it produces is mistaken for strength. The physician enters the room as a figure of calm certainty. His presence is never abrupt. He removes his gloves slowly, sets his bag down with care, speaks in tones meant to reassure rather than alarm. He understands the value of demeanor. Authority in this age is most effective when it is quiet. A raised voice suggests doubt. Confidence is conveyed through gentleness. He asks how she's been feeling. The question is polite, almost ceremonial, and the answer is expected to match it. She speaks of nerves, of restlessness, of a heaviness that settles without warning. She does not speak of fear or loneliness or the creeping unease that arrives when the bottle is empty. She has learned the proper vocabulary. He has taught it to her, though neither of them would say so. He listens with practiced sympathy. He nods at the right moments. He does not challenge her interpretation of her own discomfort because he has already supplied it. Her suffering fits within familiar categories. He has seen this many times before. He will see it many times again. The examination, if there is one, is brief. A wrist taken lightly, fingers resting against skin as if to reassure rather than diagnose. A glance at the eyes. A question about sleep. The body itself offers little information that medicine knows how to read. What matters is the narrative, and the narrative is already complete. Nerves remain unsettled. Calm must be maintained. The physician reaches for his pen without hesitation. He adjusts the dosage slightly, just enough to address the symptoms she has described. He does not frame this as escalation. He calls it refinement. Bodies change, he explains. Treatments must adapt. There is no hint of danger in his voice, no suggestion that this adjustment might lead somewhere irreversible. He is not careless. He is consistent. Medicine, at this moment in history, is caught between confidence and ignorance. Doctors possess enough knowledge to command trust, but not enough to foresee consequences. Opium has been used for centuries. Its dangers are associated with excess, with vice, with populations far removed from polite society. The physician sees none of that here. He sees moderation, respectability, control. The woman trusts him because she has been taught to. He represents science, order, progress. To question his guidance would be ungrateful, even irrational. He is kind, he listens, he offers relief. What more could be asked? When she hesitates, when she wonders aloud whether she might be relying on the drops too often, he smiles gently. Reassurance is part of his craft. Better calm than distress, he says. Better sleep than exhaustion. Better relief than suffering. He reminds her that untreated nerves can worsen, can lead to collapse, to hysteria, to far more serious conditions. The implication is clear. Continued treatment is not indulgence, but prevention. His gentle hand closes the matter. What he does not see, or does not wish to see, is how thoroughly his authority shapes her choices. Each renewal of the prescription reinforces the idea that her reliance is justified. Each visit confirms that nothing is wrong enough to demand change. The medicine is working. Therefore, the system is sound. In this way, responsibility disperses itself. The physician is not forcing her to take laudanum. She is choosing it under guidance. She is following instructions. If dependence develops, it does so within a framework that absolves everyone involved. The doctor prescribed, the patient complied, the medicine behaved as expected. And yet, the body keeps its own account. It remembers the steady hand that delivered relief. It associates comfort with authority. It learns that distress is not to be explored, but quieted. Over time, the physician's presence becomes unnecessary. His approval has already been internalized. The gentle hand withdraws, leaving behind a habit that no longer requires supervision. When concern finally surfaces, when whispers begin to circulate in medical journals about tolerance, about dependence, it arrives too late for many. Years of reassurance cannot be undone by cautious language. Trust, once established, does not dissolve easily. The physician continues his rounds. He continues to prescribe. He continues to believe in calm. And the women under his care continue to soften their suffering into silence, guided by the same gentle hand that never quite learns what it has set in motion. Sleep arrives differently when it is summoned rather than surrendered to. It does not drift in on the slow tide of fatigue, nor does it negotiate with memory and thought. It descends instead, sudden, decisive, heavy. The mind does not wander toward rest. It is guided there, ushered gently but firmly into silence. The first night it happens, the woman notices immediately. She has prepared herself for the usual rituals, the careful extinguishing of lamps, the settling of pillows, the familiar anticipation of restlessness. She expects the mind to circle its concerns, to revisit conversations, to linger on losses and unfinished thoughts. This has been the pattern for years. Night has never been kind. But tonight, after the measured drops, something changes. The bed does not feel as cold. The darkness does not press so close. The thoughts that usually gather at the edge of consciousness disperse without argument. There is a warmth spreading through her limbs, a loosening of the tightness she has come to accept as normal. The world recedes not gradually, but completely. And then, nothing. No dreams, no images, no restless half-waking moments where the mind stirs and resists. Just a smooth, uninterrupted absence, a blackness so complete it feels for the first time in memory like peace. When she wakes, it is morning. The shock of it lingers longer than the sleep itself. She lies still, listening to the house come alive around her, astonished by the simple fact of having rested. Her body feels heavier, slower, but undeniably calmer. The ache behind her eyes is gone. The tight coil in her chest has loosened. Even sorrow feels distant, as though it belongs to another version of herself. This, she thinks, is what rest must be. The sensation is intoxicating not because it excites, but because it erases. For someone long deprived of unbroken sleep, the absence of dreaming feels like mercy. Dreams, after all, have a way of resurrecting what daylight manages to contain. They reopen wounds. They replay losses. To sleep without them feels like reprieve. She mentions it later, carefully, to the physician. He is pleased. This is evidence of success. Restorative sleep is the goal, he reminds her. Dreams are not essential. In fact, excessive dreaming can indicate agitation of the nerves. The absence of dreams suggests that the system has finally settled. The logic is comforting, and so she learns to associate true rest not with natural fatigue, but with chemical silence. Sleep becomes something that must be engineered, not trusted. When a night passes without the drops and rest proves elusive once more, the conclusion feels obvious. The body has not failed. The treatment has simply been withheld. She resumes the routine without hesitation. The nights that follow blur together. Sleep arrives reliably now, smooth and unbroken. Mornings are easier. She moves through her days with less resistance, less emotional drag. Others notice the change and comment on it, approvingly. "You seem so much better," they say. "So rested." No one asks what it cost. What she does not yet recognize is the subtle shift in how sleep feels. It no longer refreshes so much as it sedates. Waking brings clarity, but not vitality. The body rests, but something deeper remains untouched. Still, this distinction feels academic compared to the relief of escaping wakeful nights. And yet, when the dreams do return, faint at first, then sharper, they do so with a cruelty she does not remember. They feel intrusive, almost violent, as though they do not belong. Their presence alarms her far more than their content ever did. Dreams become symptoms. Silence becomes health. In time, she learns to take the drops earlier, ensuring the transition into sleep is swift enough to prevent any lingering thought. The space between consciousness and oblivion narrows. There is no opportunity for reflection, for processing, for the mind to wander where it should. The first sleep without dreams teaches a powerful lesson that awareness itself can be escaped. Once learned, it is not easily unlearned, and so, night after night, she steps willingly into the same darkness, mistaking its depth for peace, unaware that something essential has been quieted along with the pain. Silence at first feels like relief. It settles gently, without demand, filling the spaces where discomfort once spoke too loudly. The body moves more smoothly through its days. The mind no longer startles so easily. The sharp edges of feeling are rounded, softened, made agreeable. In a world that prizes composure above all else, this quiet is mistaken for balance. No one notices when silence begins to linger. It creeps in gradually, disguising itself as stability. Conversations feel easier because there is less impulse to interrupt, to argue, to confess. Emotional responses arrive dulled, delayed, as though filtered through layers of gauze. Laughter comes when expected. Sympathy is offered when required. Nothing is out of place. And so, no one asks questions. The woman herself begins to trust the silence. It feels dependable, predictable. Where once her days were punctuated by waves of discomfort, physical, emotional, unnamed, now there is a smooth continuity. The bottle has taught her how to live without disruption. She has learned to preempt pain rather than endure it. In time, she no longer remembers exactly what the unrest felt like. The body adapts quickly to this new order. It begins to expect quiet as the default state. Any return of agitation feels alarming, almost unnatural. A restless afternoon, a sudden sadness, a flare of irritation, these are no longer accepted as part of being alive. They are interpreted as failures, as signs that something has gone wrong. The response is immediate and automatic. A few drops restore the silence. The habit reinforces itself. What once required conscious decision becomes reflex. The bottle is reached for without thought, as naturally as a shawl against cold. There is no internal debate, no weighing of necessity. Relief has become routine. Silence has become maintenance. Around her, life continues to demand performance. Duties are fulfilled. Expectations are met. She appears calm, efficient, untroubled. The absence of visible suffering is taken as proof of health. No one considers that silence, too, can be a symptom. Over time, something subtler begins to fade. Feelings that once carried weight now arrive flattened, stripped of urgency. Joy is pleasant, but shallow. Sorrow is distant, manageable, abstract. Anger rarely surfaces at all. The emotional range narrows quietly, without announcement. Nothing feels wrong enough to provoke concern. This narrowing is praised. She is admired for her steadiness, her reliability, her composure. She no longer weeps unexpectedly or withdraws without explanation. She is, in every visible sense, improved. The cost of this improvement remains invisible, even to herself. Silence, after all, does not announce its presence. It erases. The habit deepens as the years pass. The dose adjusts. The routine solidifies. There is no clear moment when reliance becomes dependence, because nothing dramatic occurs. No collapse, no scandal, no confession whispered in shame. Addiction does not always arrive with chaos. Sometimes it arrives with order. The most dangerous aspect of the silence is how reasonable it feels. To remove it now would invite questions she no longer knows how to answer. Who would she be without the quiet? What thoughts would return? What emotions would demand attention? The prospect feels unsettling, even threatening. Silence has become protection, and so it is preserved. The habit is passed along quietly, too. Other women notice her calm and ask how she manages so well. She offers reassurance rather than warning. Just a little help, she says. Nothing excessive, perfectly safe. The language she uses mirrors the language that once convinced her. Thus, the silence spreads, not through instruction, but through example. In a society that fears disorder and reveres restraint, silence is rewarded. It is mistaken for strength, for virtue, for self-mastery. Few recognize it for what it has become. A learned absence, maintained chemically, defended socially, rarely questioned. By the time silence becomes habit, it no longer feels like loss. It feels like life, as it is now lived. The change is so slight it feels imaginary. At first, it presents as a question rather than a need. Did the bottle always empty this quickly? Did the calm once arrive faster, linger longer? The woman considers these thoughts briefly, then dismisses them. Bodies change. Circumstances shift. Nothing remains fixed forever. It is unreasonable to expect relief to behave exactly as it once did. And yet, something has altered. The familiar dose still works, but not quite as completely. The warmth arrives, but it fades sooner. The hush settles, but it does not hold. Sleep comes, but with more effort. Small irritations slip through the quiet that once contained them entirely. The body, having learned the language of relief, now seems to ask for clearer articulation. The response feels obvious. One more drop. It is added without ceremony, without guilt. A practical adjustment. The physician himself once said that sensitivity varies, that treatment must be responsive. This is not excess. This is attentiveness. The bottle allows for such discretion. It offers flexibility without confrontation. The difference is immediate. The calm deepens again, satisfying in its familiarity. The mind smooths. The body relaxes. The woman feels reassured, not alarmed. The system is working as designed. She has simply refined it. What she does not recognize is how easily refinement becomes escalation. Over time, the additional drop becomes part of the expected measure. The bottle is tilted just a fraction longer. The counting grows less precise. 10 becomes 12 without conscious acknowledgement. 12 becomes 15. The ritual remains intact even as its substance shifts. There is comfort in this gradualness. Nothing abrupt announces danger. No dramatic increase forces reflection. The changes slip into place as naturally as the habits they support. The body adapts quietly. What once brought profound relief now produces only adequacy. Calm must be maintained, not merely achieved. Any lapse feels intolerable, not because it is worse than before, but because the contrast has grown sharper. Once the body has known sustained quiet, any return of agitation feels amplified. This is not craving, she tells herself. It is calibration. The physician, when consulted, does not object. He nods thoughtfully, listens to her description of returning restlessness, of sleep that no longer holds as it once did. He adjusts the prescription without hesitation. Tolerance is not yet a word of concern. It is framed as responsiveness, as care tailored to need. Better to manage symptoms than allow them to escalate, he says, and so the drops increase with professional blessing. The woman feels no shame. Shame belongs to vice, to excess, to loss of control. She feels controlled. She feels attentive to her own well-being. The escalation is measured, supervised, justified. It does not resemble the chaos she associates with addiction. It resembles progress. The bottle's presence grows more central. It is consulted earlier in the day. Anticipatory doses become common, taken not in response to discomfort, but to prevent it. The line between treatment and maintenance blurs entirely. Relief is no longer a reaction. It is a strategy. The body begins to depend on this strategy without complaint. There are moments, brief, easily dismissed, when she notices unease between doses, a restlessness that feels unfamiliar, sharper than ordinary nerves, a faint tremor of anxiety that has no obvious source. These sensations vanish quickly once the drops are taken, reinforcing the belief that the medicine is necessary. The possibility that the medicine itself has shaped these sensations does not occur to her. Why would it? Everything about the process feels reasonable, respectable, quiet. Increasing the drops does not feel like surrender. It feels like stewardship, of comfort, of composure, of a life that must continue uninterrupted. The woman does not see herself as someone who takes more. She sees herself as someone who maintains equilibrium. And equilibrium, once achieved, must be protected at all costs. Thus, the drops increase not out of desperation, but out of diligence. Not because the world has become harsher, but because the silence has become indispensable. The bottle continues to listen, continues to answer. And with each small adjustment, the space for living without it grows narrower, though no one yet notices the walls closing in. The body is a patient teacher. It learns through repetition, through association, through the quiet reinforcement of cause and effect. When discomfort is followed consistently by relief, the lesson settles deep beyond conscious thought. Over time, the body no longer waits to be soothed. It anticipates the soothing. It prepares for it. What once arrived as pain now arrives as expectation. The woman begins to notice the change in subtle ways. A faint unease creeps in before the usual hour. A restlessness stirs not after exertion or distress, but during moments of calm. The body seems unsettled without obvious cause, as though something essential has been overlooked. She searches her day for explanation. Has she eaten too little? Overexerted herself? Entertained too long? The answers rarely satisfy. The discomfort feels different, less sharp, more insistent. It does not demand attention so much as resolution. The resolution, she knows, is close at hand. The bottle has become a point of orientation. Its presence reassures her even before it is opened. Just knowing it is there steadies the nerves. The body responds to the promise of relief as much as the relief itself. Anticipation becomes part of the effect. When she delays, out of distraction or curiosity or a fleeting sense that perhaps she might manage without, the body reacts swiftly. The unease sharpens. Thoughts grow crowded. A faint anxiety settles into the chest, unfamiliar in its intensity. This is not the old pain she once knew. This is something newer, more urgent. It disappears the moment the drops are taken. The speed of this transformation is comforting, even gratifying. It confirms what she already believes. The medicine is necessary. The body has simply made its needs clearer. There is no reason to question this logic. It feels experiential, undeniable. What she does not see is how thoroughly the body's expectations have been rewritten. Relief is no longer an interruption to discomfort. It is the baseline toward which the body strains. Without it, the system feels incomplete, unbalanced, wrong. The discomfort that arises in its absence is not evidence of illness returning. It is evidence of adaptation. But adaptation has no voice. It does not announce itself as change. It presents itself as truth. The woman begins to structure her days around this understanding. She plans her doses carefully, not to excess, but to avoid the return of that uneasy anticipation. She is not seeking pleasure. She is preventing distress. The distinction feels important, reassuring. She tells herself she is listening to her body, and in a sense, she is. The tragedy lies in what the body has been taught to say. Moments that once would have passed unnoticed now carry weight. A delay in relief feels intolerable, not because it is severe, but because it violates expectation. The body has grown accustomed to immediate quiet. Any deviation feels like failure. This expectation extends beyond pain. Emotional disturbances, too, are short-circuited. Sadness is softened before it can gather shape. Frustration is blunted before it can sharpen into anger. The body learns that feelings, like aches, need not be endured. They can be managed preemptively. Over time, endurance itself begins to feel unnecessary, even unwise. Why suffer when relief is available? Why allow discomfort to speak when it can be silenced so easily? These questions answer themselves, not through reason, but through habit. The physician, if consulted, sees no crisis. The symptoms described are vague, subjective, familiar. He adjusts the dose again, mildly, approvingly. The body's expectations are reinforced by medical sanction. There is no external counterweight to the internal logic taking shape. The woman does not feel trapped. She feels aligned. Her body and her routine now move in concert, synchronized by chemistry. The expectation of relief has become as natural as hunger or fatigue. It does not feel like dependence. It feels like understanding oneself properly. And yet, something essential has shifted. The body no longer knows how to exist in discomfort without interpreting it as error. It no longer remembers how to wait. Relief has become not a gift, but a requirement. In teaching the body to expect quiet, the medicine has taught it to fear its own voice. And once that lesson is learned, the body will continue to ask for relief, not because it is broken, but because it has been trained to believe that silence is the only acceptable state. There are rooms in every respectable house where suffering is permitted to exist, so long as it remains unseen. They are small, carefully appointed spaces, boudoir, sitting rooms, private chambers, set slightly apart from the life of the household. Here, fainting couches wait patiently, upholstered in pale fabrics meant to suggest fragility rather than collapse. Here, doors close softly, shutting out noise, obligation, and scrutiny. What happens behind them is understood without being discussed. These rooms are not places of crisis. They are places of containment. When a woman feels herself wavering, when the room tilts slightly, when her breath grows shallow, when a sudden weakness overtakes her limbs, she does not fall. She withdraws. She excuses herself politely, citing nerves or fatigue, and disappears into one of these quiet spaces where no one will ask uncomfortable questions. The fainting couch receives her without judgment. She reclines, arranges her skirts, allows her body to surrender just enough to recover composure. The episode is framed not as failure, but as delicacy. Fragility, after all, is admired when it is controlled. A woman who collapses publicly is embarrassing. A woman who retires gracefully is refined. Laudanum often waits nearby. It is kept within reach, tucked discreetly into a drawer, or resting on a small table beside a glass. The ritual unfolds without urgency. A few drops, a measured breath. The familiar warmth spreads, steadying the body before it can betray her further. The faintness passes quickly. What no one acknowledges is how often these episodes occur or how much effort goes into preventing them from becoming visible. The fainting couch absorbs more than bodies. It absorbs evidence. It allows symptoms to be managed privately, ensuring that public life remains uninterrupted. Closed doors play their part as well. Behind them, discomfort can be addressed without consequence. Tears may fall. Breathing may falter. The medicine may be taken more frequently than anyone realizes. None of this threatens reputation so long as it remains contained. Privacy becomes protection, not for the woman's well-being, but for society's illusion of stability. In time, the body learns to associate these spaces with relief. The moment she crosses the threshold, tension eases. The fainting couch, the closed door, the bottle, they form a constellation of reassurance. Discomfort does not need to be endured. It can be managed discreetly, elegantly, without disturbance. This management, however, carries a cost. Each private episode reinforces the belief that suffering must remain hidden, that weakness, once felt, must be corrected immediately. There is no space here for inquiry, for reflection, for asking why the body falters so often. The goal is restoration of appearance, not understanding. The woman becomes adept at recognizing the earliest signs of instability. She excuses herself sooner. She medicates earlier. Prevention becomes the guiding principle. It is far easier to retreat than to risk being seen unwell. Over time, the retreats grow more frequent. What once felt like occasional fragility becomes a regular rhythm of withdrawal and return. Social engagements are punctuated by brief disappearances. Household routines adjust themselves around these private intervals. Servants notice but do not comment. Families accept it as temperament. No one suggests less strain. No one suggests change. The fainting couch, meant to receive the occasional collapse, becomes a station of routine maintenance. The closed door becomes less a boundary and more a necessity. Without these spaces, the woman fears she might be forced to confront her condition openly, and that possibility feels far more dangerous than the condition itself. Laudanum ensures that these retreats remain brief and effective. It guarantees that the woman will re-emerge composed, her face smooth, her voice steady. The medicine preserves the illusion that nothing has truly happened, and so the pattern holds. Fainting couches and closed doors do not signal illness in this world. They signal propriety. They allow suffering to be acknowledged without being addressed. They provide a place where dependence can deepen unnoticed, sheltered from the gaze of those who might otherwise intervene. Behind closed doors, the body learns that relief is always nearby, that discomfort need never be endured publicly, that silence is the safest response. And with each quiet retreat, the line between fragility and dependency blurs further, softened by upholstery, sealed by polished wood, and steadied by a few carefully counted drops. The world expects her to stand. It expects her to move through the day with poise, to attend to visitors, to offer smiles and conversation, to maintain the appearance of life uninterrupted. She has learned the gestures, the tilt of the head, the careful placement of the hands, the measured step across polished floors. Yet her body at times no longer obeys with the same compliance. Limbs feel leaden, muscles ache with a heaviness that no rest can fully alleviate. A simple rise from a chair becomes an effort that demands concentration, as if gravity itself conspires against her. The fainting couch, once a place of temporary relief, now becomes a station of prolonged necessity. She leans back, breath caught, adjusting her skirts, willing herself to regain composure before anyone notices the tremor that runs along her spine. The small room behind closed doors becomes essential, a refuge where she can gather strength and hide the vulnerability that polite society refuses to acknowledge. It is here that laudanum proves indispensable. A few measured drops, carefully administered, restore coordination, loosen tension, ease the tremor that threatens her carefully constructed composure. Relief does not surge, it settles, creeping gently through the body until stiffness softens and breath returns to normal cadence. The effect is both subtle and profound. She feels herself able to rise again, able to meet the world without betraying the extent of her dependence. The physician, when consulted, calls it a refinement of treatment. The dosage is adjusted, not to punish, but to accommodate the body's evolving needs. He speaks of sensitivity, constitution, and the necessity of maintaining equilibrium. He does not name what is forming, for the language of dependence has not yet entered these parlors. What he offers is legitimacy, and legitimacy carries authority. It assures her that what she experiences is not weakness, but fragility, an attribute to be managed rather than an affliction to be feared. Even the servants, silent witnesses to countless retreats behind curtains and doors, learn the signs. They know when the steps will falter, when the hand reaches unconsciously toward the small bottle, when the tremor is more than fatigue and less than collapse. Yet their knowledge carries no admonition. They have been trained by observation to preserve the illusion of composure, to never disrupt the delicacy of this private battle. The woman remains the arbiter of her own quiet suffering. In the parlor, society sees only grace. Conversation proceeds, visitors arrive, and the house appears alive with energy and charm. She offers the expected smiles, nods politely, engages in light laughter. All the while, beneath the surface, her body records the lesson that stability can be purchased, that failure is avoidable, that dependence is safe when cloaked in refinement. The mind, too, learns its place. Anxiety that might have accompanied weakness is suppressed, flattened under the assurance of chemical quiet. Fear is minimized. Thoughts of incapacity are shunted aside before they can gather weight. The body and mind come to expect intervention, anticipating relief as naturally as it anticipates the arrival of tea at 4 o'clock. Yet, there's a quiet cost. The strength she once relied upon is no longer innate. Each successful rise is mediated, calibrated, sanctioned by drops. What was once a simple act of will is now contingent, dependent on a routine that demands secrecy and discipline. And with each reliance, the dependence deepens imperceptibly, enmeshed in the very elegance that protects her from scrutiny. In this way, the woman who cannot rise becomes the woman who can rise only with help, and yet no one sees the shift. She remains composed, graceful, and respectable. The quiet tragedy is hidden, framed by soft upholstery, closed doors, and the amber liquid that ensures the world will never know how fragile her strength has become. The physician enters, always precise, always calm, carrying the authority of science like a cloak. His voice is soft but assured, the cadence of certainty offering solace before words have even begun. He examines the patient with hands practiced in gentleness, asking the requisite questions. How is your sleep? How are the nerves? Are the palpitations worse? Answers are delivered in careful moderation, phrased to satisfy his expectations and his training. Yet there is one question he never asks. Why? Why does the discomfort persist? Why does the body tremble despite careful management? Why does the heart ache when the world demands composure? Such inquiries are unnecessary in an era that values appearances over introspection, symptoms over origin. The physician treats what can be treated, the manifestations, the observable, the measurable. While leaving the deeper currents unexamined, he prescribes, adjusts, reassures. Each visit reinforces the same lesson, that medicine is sufficient to maintain order, that calm is achievable without interrogation, that suffering need not be understood so long as it can be subdued. The drops are increased when symptoms intensify, never questioned. The rationale is simple. The body signals, the remedy responds, the patient conforms. Inquiry has no place in this delicate transaction. For the woman, this approach feels natural, even comforting. She does not need to articulate why her nerves flare, why her sorrow lingers, why her tremors appear when no cause is evident. The absence of interrogation spares her shame. It spares confrontation. It spares the need to confront truths that may be too heavy to bear aloud. She trusts the doctor implicitly, relying on his authority to define the boundaries of normalcy and propriety. The laudanum, measured and precise, becomes the vehicle of this understanding. It quiets not only physical discomfort but the anxiety that arises from the unasked questions. It preempts the need for reflection, rendering curiosity unnecessary. Sleep arrives on time, the body relaxes, composure is restored, and the room once again holds only the acceptable illusion of health. Servants, too, have learned the rhythm. They see the visits, the measured drops, the faint tremor that signals intervention, and they do not speak. The household adapts quietly, accommodating the rituals without judgment, ensuring that the visible world remains undisturbed. The woman moves among her duties with grace, her reliance concealed, her dependence invisible. The physician's silence on the origins of distress reinforces this pattern. By never asking why, he implicitly sanctions the treatment as sufficient. The body learns that relief can be summoned without comprehension. The mind learns that questions are unnecessary, that obedience to the prescribed routine ensures safety, and that deviation invites discomfort too subtle to name but too urgent to ignore. Over time, dependence solidifies in this quiet vacuum of inquiry. There is no dramatic fall, no overt crisis, no confrontation with reality. The medicine is taken, the body responds, and life continues uninterrupted. The gentle hand of authority guides not toward understanding, but toward conformity, shaping habit and expectation alike. Yet the absence of why is a quiet tyranny. The patient learns to obey, to anticipate, to rely, while the causes of her unrest remain unexamined, unresolved. Relief is immediate, but understanding is deferred indefinitely. Pain is subdued, but curiosity, reflection, and insight are stifled. Thus, the doctor who never asks why becomes an unknowing architect of quiet dependence. The physician's gentleness shields the patient from judgment, but it also shields her from herself. The body grows accustomed to intervention, the mind grows accustomed to passivity, and society, ever observant of appearances, sees only composure where a deeper vulnerability has quietly taken root. Motherhood is never as simple as it appears. In the parlors and nurseries of the Gilded Age, women are celebrated for their ability to nurture, to endure sleepless nights, to manage the delicate balance between care and composure. Yet what is praised as fortitude is often supported by the quiet presence of medicine, by the amber liquid that ensures patience and composure remain intact. Laudanum, once a subtle comfort for nerves, becomes an almost invisible partner in the work of raising children. The mornings begin before dawn, with the soft cries of infants threading through shadowed hallways. Mothers rise, sometimes reluctantly, to attend to them. In the cradle, a child's small chest rises and falls unevenly. A cough echoes faintly in the chamber. For years, she has endured sleepless nights without complaint, but the faint tremor of exhaustion now lingers longer, a weight upon her limbs. The drops, measured and precise, provide a cushion. They do not restore energy, nor do they cure weariness entirely, but they offer enough composure to proceed. In the nursery, as in the drawing room, appearances are paramount. The infant must be soothed, the linens adjusted, the tiny garments folded and immaculate. Visitors may come, expecting to find a mother attentive, serene, and fully capable. Behind the veil of gentility, the woman manages both child and self, guided by habit, strengthened by chemical quiet. The body functions, the hands move deftly, the smile is delivered on time, but the mind is aware of the tenuous balance. Any lapse in routine could unravel the careful illusion. Grief and worry, the quiet shadows of motherhood, are softened by the medicine. A child's illness, a temper tantrum, a restless night, these moments, which might once have broken her spirit, are now manageable. The drops do not eliminate fear, they merely contain it, smoothing the edges of anxiety until it can be tolerated. Sleep, when it arrives, is steadier, more dependable, and mornings carry the faint echo of calm rather than despair. Yet this calm has its consequences. The body learns to rely upon it. Where natural endurance once sufficed, it now expects support. Fatigue becomes intolerable without it. Emotional strain triggers anticipation of relief before any conscious thought can intervene. Dependency forms, not in rebellion or excess, but in quiet partnership with the daily duties of care. The mother becomes attuned less to her own needs than to the rhythm imposed by child, household, and society. The drops are not indulgence, they are maintenance. Even the infants are subtly affected. Children sense the softened rhythms, the measured movements, the quieted anxiety. They learn composure before the lessons of resilience, absorbing not only lullabies, but the chemical silence that underpins them. The nursery becomes a theater of appearances: calm children, calm mother, calm household, all preserved by discretion and the amber tincture. Family and servants observe only the visible success. They remark on the mother's patience, on the smooth flow of her days, on her grace under fatigue. They do not witness the whispered dependence, the quiet calculation of doses, the small retreats behind curtains where composure is restored. The truth of her endurance is hidden, known only to herself, and the soft amber liquid that ensures the world remains undisturbed. Motherhood, in this context, is both vocation and confinement. It demands attention, care, vigilance, and a quiet surrender to that which sustains composure. Relief is constant, invisible, unquestioned, and necessary. It preserves both function and reputation while quietly reshaping the very experience of endurance. And so the veil remains. Behind it, the woman manages life, death, and expectation, fortified by habit, habituated by chemistry, and guided by the unspoken laws of propriety. Her love is constant, her patience remarkable, her suffering discreet. And in this quiet arrangement, dependency grows as seamlessly as life itself. Days arrive in a haze, imperceptible at first, like morning mist settling over a quiet garden. The sunlight filters weakly through heavy drapery, touching polished wood and pale wallpaper with a muted glow. Within these rooms, the rhythm of life proceeds as it always has: breakfast served, letters read and answered, visitors received, duties attended. Yet, beneath the familiar cadence, a subtle transformation unfolds, one that eludes observation and yet shapes every movement, every thought. The woman notices it in moments both large and small: tasks once demanding, folding laundry, attending a social call, guiding a child, now proceed without effort, yet with a curious detachment. Conversation flows, polite and precise, but she finds herself responding automatically, thoughts drifting just beneath awareness. The sharpness of sensation is dulled. Joy, annoyance, anxiety, all arrive more softly than they once did. A fog has settled, not abrupt, not alarming, but pervasive, suffusing each hour with muted calm. Laudanum is rarely the cause she names, yet it is the instrument shaping this altered perception. The drops, taken carefully, methodically, reinforce the body's expectation of ease. They settle tension, soften nerves, and carry with them the promise of continuity. The days, once punctuated by the demands of sensation and emotion, now glide quietly under chemical guidance. Fatigue and distress, which would have risen to consciousness, are gently pushed aside. It is not sedation, strictly speaking. The woman remains functional, composed, alert enough to maintain appearances. She can manage the household, entertain with grace, counsel with patience. She performs each role with meticulous attention, yet always with a subtle distance. Life continues on the surface, uninterrupted, while beneath, the edges have softened and the sharp contours of experience blur into gentle gradients. This fog, while comforting, carries its own consequences. Time feels less urgent, memories less vivid, and emotions less demanding. She no longer feels compelled to question or react as acutely as before. Small frustrations slip past unnoticed, moments of beauty are observed but not fully absorbed. Life feels less immediate, less dangerous, and yet less alive. Even the interactions with others are affected. The servants note the calm, the children sense it, visitors perceive it, though none can articulate why it feels different. It is the new normal, the product of quiet chemical orchestration combined with habit. Composure becomes habitual, and habit becomes expectation. The world expects calm, the body anticipates it, and the mind follows obediently. The soft fog carries a subtle ethical weight. Decisions, reflections, and introspections are all dulled slightly, just enough that she moves through life without confronting the full measure of her dependence. Doubt is softened, fear is softened, sorrow is softened. The woman believes she is managing well, that she is strong and in control, while the fog ensures that even the recognition of reliance is gently obscured. Still, the calm is seductive. It reinforces itself daily, a feedback loop of relief and expectation. Every moment of smooth composure validates the habit. Every day without visible disruption confirms the system. The body and mind, trained to anticipate chemical quiet, are rewarded for compliance, and the fog thickens imperceptibly, stretching across mornings, afternoons, and evenings alike. By the time the awareness of its presence emerges, it is too familiar to resist. Days proceed softly, without challenge, without pain, without resistance. The fog has become both protector and prison. It preserves the outward illusion of composure while quietly tightening the grip of dependence. And in its embrace, the woman moves steadily through her world, untouched by alarm, yet subtly altered at every turn. In the parlors and drawing rooms of the Gilded Age, appearances are everything. The polished wood of tables, the gleam of silverware, the careful arrangement of vases and flowers. Each object, each gesture, each glance is meticulously curated to convey order, refinement, and unassailable composure. Yet beneath the surface of these impeccably maintained spaces lies a delicate balancing act, the management of bodies, minds, and nerves that are never as composed as they appear. Here, respectability functions as camouflage. The woman moves through her day cloaked in propriety. Every gesture is measured, every word weighed. She smiles at visitors with the ease of someone accustomed to attention. She converses with poise, laughs at the proper moments, and listens with patience that seems innate. To the casual observer, she is the very picture of refinement, calm, gracious, and unwavering. Few notice the subtle tremor in her fingers as she adjusts her gloves, or the quiet sigh that escapes behind her hand when the conversation lags. It is in these small, almost imperceptible acts that dependence hides. Laudanum, administered discreetly, ensures that the body and mind do not betray the cultivated exterior. The drops are not indulgence, they are maintenance. They allow her to meet expectations, to fulfill obligations, and to sustain the illusion of unbroken composure. Each measured dose reinforces the camouflage, masking the subtle signs that something beneath is amiss. Servants and family members participate in this concealment, often unconsciously. They have learned the rhythms of her need, the timing of retreats behind closed doors, the softening of steps when weakness threatens to become visible. Silence is preserved, gestures are perfected, and the household functions as both stage and guardian of propriety. No one questions the necessity of composure. Indeed, any disruption would be interpreted as failure, weakness, or impropriety. Even the physician, whose authority originally sanctioned the use of laudanum, contributes to this camouflage. His approval and careful instructions provide legitimacy to the habit. The treatment is framed as refinement, care, attentiveness to a delicate constitution. The outward performance of stability is indistinguishable from the chemical support that maintains it. Dependence is invisible because the appearance of control is preserved at every level. In this society, virtue is inseparable from composure. Women are praised for endurance, patience, and grace under strain. Those who falter publicly invite criticism, suspicion, and gossip. Respectability protects her not only from social reproach, but also from introspection. The chemical calm ensures that the inner turbulence remains masked, while the carefully rehearsed gestures ensure that no observer doubts her strength. Camouflage, in this context, is survival. The cost, however, is subtle and accumulating. By masking distress, she avoids confrontation with the EE. Deeper sources of unease, grief, fatigue, anxiety, or unmet need. The body adapts to chemical support. The mind grows accustomed to anticipating relief rather than resolving discomfort. Emotional responses, once immediate and authentic, are dulled. The life beneath the veneer of composure is muted, compressed, and dependent. Yet, the camouflage is complete. Visitors depart with admiration, the household operates smoothly, and she moves through the day with a sense of accomplishment. The illusion of stability is so convincing that even she begins to accept it as truth. The line between reality and performance blurs. The body and mind respond automatically, conditioned by habit, expectation, and chemical quiet. Respectability, in this world, is more than a social standard. It is a shield, a veil, and a cage. It conceals weakness even as it nurtures dependence. Behind the graceful gestures and polite smiles, the woman survives, sustained by the amber drops, protected by decorum, and camouflaged by the very virtue that both honors and confines her. The pen hovers above the paper, and the hand trembles ever so slightly. Thoughts, sharp and insistent, press to escape, yet etiquette restrains them, as does habit, as does the quiet whisper of dependence that has come to inhabit every chamber of consciousness. Letters are composed meticulously, in careful cursive, with ink dark and flowing, words chosen for precision and delicacy. Each phrase is weighed against propriety, each sentiment filtered through the lens of decorum. These letters, however, are rarely sent. They exist instead as private confessions, rehearsals of feeling, or quiet exercises in acknowledgement of the self that cannot be expressed publicly. A mother writes to her deceased child, a wife to a husband whose affection is distant or unspoken, a sister to another sister whose life has drifted far from proximity. They are letters that speak of longing, frustration, grief, or despair, yet they are folded and tucked away, unread by anyone else, known only to the hand that wrote them and the mind that conceived them. Laudanum ensures that the act of writing does not become unbearable. The warmth spreads through the fingers, softening the tremor that accompanies delicate thought. Nerves that might otherwise rebel under the pressure of raw emotion are soothed, allowing the words to flow without interruption. Each letter becomes a small sanctuary, a space in which the mind can articulate sorrow or desire without fear of judgment or consequence. The act of writing itself becomes ritualized. Paper is chosen with care, envelopes sealed with wax, ink replenished thoughtfully. The hand that guides the quill is steady, deliberate, refined. The external appearance of calm remains intact, while the internal world unfurls in private, intimate expression. The letters bear witness to the inner life, capturing the turbulence that polite society demands be hidden. And yet, the letters remain unsent. To send them would be to expose vulnerability, to invite scrutiny, to risk the perception of weakness. Dependence, chemical and habitual, has taught the body and mind that relief must remain private, that expression must be contained, that the world cannot witness the full measure of emotion. To reveal these letters would be to lift the veil, and the veil is sacred. In these hidden words, the woman rehearses her grief, her anger, her longing, and her despair. She can address sorrow without consequence, confront fear without alarm. Each unsent letter reinforces the illusion of composure, even as it affirms the depth of experience that must remain invisible. The process is both cathartic and binding, a private acknowledgement that pain exists, paired with the certainty that it cannot be shared. Over time, this becomes habit. Letters pile in drawers and cabinets, carefully stacked, never mailed, always accessible. They are diaries by another name, confidences without audience, proof that a mind can remain engaged even while its expression is suppressed. The physical act of writing becomes a substitute for intervention, a ritual that maintains the body and mind in equilibrium without threatening the social order. Yet, there is a subtle erosion. Thoughts expressed on paper, while temporarily soothing, cannot alter circumstance. Emotions, softened by laudanum, remain partially deferred. The act of writing allows articulation, but not resolution. Sorrow persists, mirrored back in elegant cursive, folded neatly but never released. The chemical calm ensures endurance, but it does not heal. In this world, letters written but never sent become both refuge and reminder. They protect the woman from exposure while confirming the private reality of dependence. They preserve appearance even as they chronicle the inner life, a silent testament to the distance between what is felt and what is permitted to be known. Each unsent letter is a quiet echo of the self that cannot rise fully into the light preserved behind ink, paper, and the amber veil of quiet, chemical calm. The walls have ears, though no one would dare call them so. They absorb every creak of floorboards, every muted sigh, every whispered confession that escapes behind closed doors. In houses of refinement, the architecture itself seems to understand the rhythms of its inhabitants, the quiet ebb and flow of nerves and relief, the subtle rituals that maintain appearances while concealing the truth beneath. The house knows, even when the world outside does not. In the morning, light filters through heavy drapery, revealing polished wood and embroidered furnishings. The house awakens with its mistress, alert to her presence and attuned to her needs. The faint tremor as she descends the staircase, the careful placement of slippers on the rug, the slight hesitation before reaching for the morning bottle. All are noted, absorbed, held quietly within the very walls. Servants, accustomed to these rhythms, move in tandem, anticipating moments when silence must be preserved, when discretion is paramount. The house itself becomes a guardian of propriety. Rooms are arranged not merely for comfort, but for concealment. The fainting couch occupies a discreet corner, draped in pale fabric that both invites repose and masks vulnerability. Behind closed doors, the amber liquid waits on polished tables, within reach but never ostentatious. The positioning of furniture, the placement of screens and curtains, even the careful modulation of light and shadow collaborates in a choreography designed to maintain the illusion of control. The architecture itself conspires in the maintenance of calm, in the protection of secrecy. Visitors perceive only order and elegance. They are greeted by smooth surfaces, measured smiles, and the precise gestures of a household accustomed to appearances. Conversation flows easily, laughter is measured but genuine, and the air carries only the faint scent of flowers or fresh linens. Yet beneath this exterior, the house knows the truth. The quiet withdrawals, the carefully timed doses, the subtle tremors that never reach public view. It has witnessed them repeatedly, storing each episode as silently and faithfully as a diary without pages. The house absorbs the habit, internalizing it as part of daily rhythm. Doors are closed not only for privacy but for protection. The walls contain more than sound. They contain history, patterns, and the quiet evolution of dependence. The soft rustle of skirts, the subtle adjustment of lace, the occasional pause to steady the hand, all are preserved in memory, indexed against the hours of the day and the seasons of the year. The house does not judge, it merely remembers. Even as the woman moves through her routines with composure, the house reflects a different truth. The chemistry of laudanum courses through veins and nerves, establishing patterns that the architecture observes without intervention. The rooms, the halls, the private chambers, all witness the constant negotiation between appearance and necessity. Each retreat, each whispered sigh, each measured drop is catalogued by the very walls, forming a repository of private struggle hidden beneath a veneer of refinement. Servants participate silently, their own knowledge incorporated into the household's awareness. They anticipate needs, arrange objects, and maintain the rituals that allow the woman to exist in her carefully constructed calm. Their attentiveness ensures that the house continues to function as both stage and sanctuary, protecting the reputation of its mistress while shielding her from the consequences of exposure. The house, then, becomes more than structure. It is observer, guardian, and confederate. It preserves appearances, maintains propriety, and absorbs secrets without complaint. It knows the depth of reliance, the subtle encroachment of dependence, and the fragile balance between composure and vulnerability. Within its walls, silence is maintained, rituals are preserved, and the life that unfolds behind closed doors continues, unseen, uninterrupted, and profoundly altered. In this way, the house participates in the quiet drama of the Gilded Age. It understands the unspoken rules, it recognizes the necessity of concealment, and it holds the secrets of those who dwell within. The walls have seen it all, yet they say nothing. They only know. The gowns are delicate, the corsets tight, the gloves long and white. Every element of dress is meticulously chosen, a performance of refinement that extends beyond mere appearance to shape the body itself. In the Gilded Age, femininity is codified in silk, lace, and boned underpinnings. Women are instructed in the art of comportment, their every movement scrutinized for elegance and restraint. Frailty, cultivated and carefully displayed, becomes both expectation and virtue. From the outset, The body is trained to respond to these expectations. Corsets mold the torso, restricting breath and posture, tightening the waist, lifting the chest. They create the silhouette admired by society, but they also condition the muscles, the diaphragm, the spine. Movement becomes calculated, deliberate, even cautious. The effort required is invisible to observers, who see only grace and poise. The body learns to signal composure even when the breath is shallow, the pulse heightened, the nerves on edge. Laudanum complements this architecture of frailty. A few measured drops soften the tension imposed by attire, by social expectation, by physical strain. The amber liquid works quietly, flattening tremors, easing headaches, quieting the pull of fatigue that accompanies the long hours of standing, curtsying, and engaging. The body learns to associate outward refinement with inward sedation. Pain is masked, and vulnerability is made palatable. The interplay between fashion and chemical calm is subtle but profound. The corset tightens, the gown restricts, the drops take effect. The body relaxes just enough to maintain illusion. Should tremors appear or fatigue threaten to betray composure, a discreet sip restores equilibrium. Over time, the combination becomes habitual. Frailty, once imposed externally by clothing, is now supported internally by chemistry. The lines between cultivated delicacy and learned dependence blur. Even the smallest details are orchestrated. Gloves cover hands that may shake slightly, fans hide subtle facial expressions, and jewelry distracts the eye from the slight pallor of skin touched by fatigue. The woman learns to present herself as entirely composed, entirely unaffected, while the body whispers the truth only to her and to the amber liquid she has come to trust. Visitors marvel at the effortless elegance, the quiet endurance, the refined suffering. They do not notice the effort required to maintain each gesture, each posture, each smile. The faint tremor of nerves is softened before it becomes visible. The exhaustion of endurance is muted before it becomes audible. The woman, in effect, performs frailty as a social imperative, and chemical support ensures she never falters in the eyes of the world. This performance extends beyond the individual. Families and households learn the rhythm of composure. Servants anticipate needs, arranging furniture, adjusting light, opening and closing doors at precise moments. The home itself becomes a stage, designed to showcase elegance while concealing reliance. The environment, like the body, adapts to the expectations of appearances. Yet, beneath the silk and lace, beneath the polished manners and controlled gestures, a subtle truth persists. The body, trained to appear fragile, has learned to rely on intervention. Nerves softened chemically, muscles relaxed artificially, fatigue deferred. These are not natural states. They are the product of careful cultivation and quiet dependence. In the interplay of dress and chemistry, Gilded Age women discover a paradox. Frailty is admired, cultivated, and expected, but it comes at a cost. Strength is subordinated to appearance. Autonomy is mediated through habit and drops. And in the pursuit of perfection, the body becomes both instrument and prisoner, elegantly constrained, chemically soothed, and perpetually observed by the silent standards of a society that prizes the illusion above the reality. The chemist's shop glows softly in the gaslight, a sanctuary of order and precision amidst the bustling streets of the Gilded Age. Shelves rise to the ceiling, lined with glass bottles of every shape and size, filled with liquids that promise relief, comfort, or escape. Each label is carefully inked, every vial arranged according to type and potency. The atmosphere is scented faintly with alcohol, herbs, and chemical sweetness, a perfume that is at once reassuring and intoxicating. For the chemist, this is prosperity, quiet and assured. The women of society pass through his doors with regularity, their footsteps measured, their glances polite. They bring prescriptions signed by trusted physicians, notes requesting precise preparation, and sometimes mere hints of need expressed verbally. Each transaction is small in isolation, drops of amber liquid measured with care. But together they form a livelihood as steady and dependable as the clockwork of the city outside. Laudanum, the amber elixir of calm, moves briskly from shelf to counter to glass, its demand consistent, its appeal universal. The chemist understands its dual nature. It is medicine, socially sanctioned and legally sold, yet it carries the subtle power of dependence. He watches as young women, well-dressed, composed, and polite, accept the vial with quiet reverence, their fingers lingering on the glass as though holding not merely medicine, but reassurance itself. The wealth he accrues is discreet. There are no ostentatious displays, no boasts to neighbors, no counting of coins in public view. His prosperity is embedded in the routine, in the expectation that every woman knows precisely what she requires and will return without fail. Repeat customers are the foundation of his security, and he cultivates their loyalty with patience and discretion. He smiles politely, offers counsel without intrusion, and never questions the rhythm of their needs. Yet the chemist is not blind to the subtle consequences of his trade. He notices the slight tremors in fingers, the faint pallor of skin, the carefully managed but persistent fatigue. He observes the quiet coordination between mother and child, servant and mistress, household and visitor. He sees the ways in which chemical relief has become woven into the fabric of domestic life, ensuring that appearances remain intact while dependence deepens unseen. And still, he supplies, because to withhold would be to disrupt not only the trust he has cultivated, but also the fragile equilibrium of the households he serves. The shop itself participates in the camouflage. Bottles are arranged to suggest order and science rather than indulgence. Recipes are executed with precision as though following an immutable formula, rather than responding to repeated human need. Customers leave with their parcels tucked discreetly in paper, the amber liquid invisible beneath folds, preserving the illusion that nothing extraordinary has occurred. This quiet prosperity extends beyond the chemist himself. Families depend upon it, servants coordinate around it, the city relies on the smooth continuation of social appearances that it facilitates. Each vial dispensed reinforces the system, calm, maintained, composure preserved, dependence unspoken. The economy of care and concealment is subtle but absolute. And yet, in the calm efficiency of the shop, in the glint of glass and the soft scent of tincture, there is an unspoken truth. Each transaction furthers the quiet, insidious spread of reliance. Relief becomes expectation. Dependence becomes normalized. The women who enter do not consider that the chemist's prosperity is bound to their own evolving needs, that the invisible currency they pay is more than coin. It is the careful preservation of a life rendered manageable by amber drops and measured compliance. The chemist smiles as he hands over the next vial, oblivious to the private dramas that unfold behind doors and curtained windows. His quiet prosperity is secured, built upon the invisible labor of the body, the mind, and the society that prizes appearance above all else. And in this way, the city, the households, and the women within them are all held in delicate chemical balance, while the amber liquid continues to flow. The parlor door opens with a soft click, and the faint murmur of conversation fills the room. Afternoon sunlight, filtered through heavy curtains, dusts the polished wood and lace with gold. Tea is poured into delicate cups, the aroma of bergamot mingling with the faint sweetness of confectionery. And in the quiet corners of these drawing rooms, another ritual unfolds, one less visible, yet no less important than the art of manners or the selection of gowns, the sharing of remedies. It begins subtly. A woman mentions a restless night, a faint headache, a lingering tension she cannot explain. Another nods in sympathy, recalling similar discomforts. The language is careful, measured, nerves, vapors, fatigue. The words conceal as much as they reveal, hinting at private suffering without exposing it. And then, delicately, the suggestion is offered. A few drops of laudanum. Just enough, she says, to smooth the edges, to steady the mind, to restore composure. The tone is reassuring, almost casual, as if speaking of a favored tea blend rather than a substance capable of quieting body and spirit alike. The practice spreads naturally. Women, trained from childhood to value propriety above all else, accept such guidance without question. They take the advice discreetly, administer the tincture behind curtains or in side chambers, and return to conversation with calm restored. The parlor, a space of social display, becomes also a space of private collaboration. Experiences are exchanged in hushed tones, never documented, never spoken of outside the circle. The act of sharing remedies is as much about trust and etiquette as it is about relief. There is a rhythm to these exchanges. A nervous complaint arises, a gentle recommendation follows. The amber liquid circulates, measured, precise, unremarkable to anyone but those who know its significance. The social ritual reinforces itself. The woman who benefits quietly confirms the advice. The woman who offers it affirms her authority, and both maintain the outward appearance of composure. The household continues, untouched by the subtle network of dependence operating beneath its surface. Even the physician's role is tacitly endorsed. Recommendations are framed within the language of propriety and care. The authority of science legitimizes social sharing, allowing women to act as both patient and advisor. The boundaries of propriety are maintained, even as the boundaries of chemical reliance are expanded. Each exchange reinforces the unspoken rules: discretion, moderation, and appearances above all else. Over time, this network of shared remedies becomes a subtle social glue. Women learn not only to manage their own nerves, but to anticipate and accommodate the needs of their peers. They recognize the signs of agitation, the slight paleness of a hand, the tremor in a smile. The tincture, ever present, is dispensed as quietly as advice, integrated seamlessly into the rituals of etiquette. What might be dependence is disguised as care, vigilance, and refinement, yet beneath the calm, the pattern persists. Reliance grows unnoticed, normalized, invisible to all except those participating. Each discreet administration teaches the body and mind to expect relief, to associate composure with chemical support. The social rituals preserve appearances while reinforcing dependence. The parlor becomes a theater in which propriety is performed, but the mechanisms that maintain it are hidden, circulating as quietly as conversation itself. Thus, in the Gilded Age, friendship and sociality are intertwined with chemical management. Advice is given as courtesy, medicine as gesture, and the boundaries between support and reliance blur. The women of refinement continue to smile, to converse, to perform their roles flawlessly, all while the soft amber thread of laudanum weaves invisibly through their days, connecting confidences, easing nerves, and sustaining the illusion of unbroken composure. The days unfold with an unbroken rhythm, each moment measured, each gesture rehearsed, each smile delivered with precision. And yet, beneath the composure lies a subtle change that is difficult to perceive, even for the woman herself. The body, conditioned by repeated exposure to laudanum, begins to require more to achieve the same quiet. A dose that once sufficed now offers only partial relief, a fleeting calm that fades before the hour is complete. The phenomenon is gradual, imperceptible at first, and entirely unquestioned. Tolerance, in this context, is not alarming. It is not announced by dramatic collapse or outward chaos. There are no seizures, no fainting, no visible distress. The woman continues to move through her days with elegance, hosting guests, attending calls, managing household duties with impeccable composure. The subtle increase in quantity, the slight adjustment of drops, is rationalized as necessity, attentiveness, prudence. There is no recognition that dependence has deepened, only the understanding that the body requires care. The physician, when consulted, observes the change without concern. He nods thoughtfully as she describes lingering agitation, a restless sleep, or slight tremors, and he adjusts the prescription accordingly. In his eyes, the phenomenon is simply evidence of variation in constitution, a reminder that delicate systems must be maintained with sensitivity. He sees no reason for alarm, no evidence of moral failing, no indication of irreversible harm. His authority validates the incremental increase, framing it as refinement rather than progression toward dependency. The woman herself perceives nothing amiss. She believes she is responding to the needs of her body, exercising judgment and discretion. She does not reflect on the cumulative effect of repeated reliance, nor does she consider the subtle recalibration that has taken place. The body has learned its own language. Agitation signals drops, discomfort predicts intervention. Relief is anticipated, expected, and quietly demanded. Each administration reinforces the pattern, deepening the dependence while leaving appearances untouched. Society, too, remains oblivious. Visitors, neighbors, family, and servants observe only the surface. The woman's demeanor remains composed, her gestures remain precise, her interactions remain polite and measured. The smooth operation of her household reinforces the illusion of normalcy. No one perceives the quiet recalibration occurring beneath the layers of silk, lace, and measured speech. The house itself, attuned to rhythms long practiced, absorbs these adjustments silently, the furniture and walls becoming witness to the subtle escalation. Tolerance, when it manifests, is met with continued calm and discreet management. There is no panic, no inquiry, no intervention. Each adjustment is framed as prudence, not excess, as refinement, not indulgence. The body, having learned to expect relief, continues to function. Under the guidance of chemical assurance, the mind, conditioned to anticipate quiet, accepts it without protest. The rhythm of dependence continues, seamlessly integrated into the daily pattern of life. Over time, what was once a measured response to temporary discomfort becomes a permanent scaffold. The body expects laudanum not merely as relief, but as a baseline. Calm, composure, and functionality are now contingent upon its presence. The subtle increase in dosage is accepted without question, because the logic of necessity has been internalized. No one perceives the danger, no one acknowledges the shift, and yet the transformation is complete. The body, the mind, and the routines of daily life now revolve around a quiet chemical authority, maintained without alarm, observed by no one, and entirely hidden beneath the surface of respectability. It begins as a whisper, imperceptible at first, a subtle tension beneath the skin, a faint vibration in the limbs, a slight tremor of the hand that no one else perceives. The body, long trained to obey and adapt, begins to protest softly, quietly, a message delivered not in sound but in sensation. It is a revolt that is neither sudden nor dramatic, yet it carries an authority all its own, insistent and unrelenting in its quietude. For years, the body has been conditioned by the rhythm of relief. The amber liquid, measured and precise, has guided it through days and nights of expectation, softening discomfort, calming nerves, smoothing the sharp edges of pain and anxiety. Each administration reinforced the lesson that composure could be summoned, that calm could be maintained, and that suffering, when it appeared, was always temporary and manageable. The mind has learned the same lesson, anticipating relief, trusting in the familiar ritual, accepting the authority of the physician, the chemist, and society alike. Yet the body remembers itself differently than the mind does. It recalls sensation in its full dimension, the intensity of pain, the edge of fatigue, the trembling of nerves left untreated. Even beneath chemical calm, a shadow of unrest lingers, accumulating imperceptibly with each repeated dose. Over time, the body begins to push back, signaling in small, almost invisible ways that the arrangement it has lived under for so long is no longer sufficient. A pulse quickens without cause, muscles tighten inexplicably, sleep feels shallow despite proper dosage. Small irritations, once dulled, press against awareness with subtle insistence. The body demands recognition, not for dramatics, but simply because its own equilibrium has been altered. The quiet revolt is not loud. It cannot be, for the culture, the medicine, and the expectations all conspire to suppress its expression. But it is persistent, accumulating beneath the veneer of composure. The woman notices these signals vaguely at first, attributing them to fatigue, emotional strain, or perhaps the occasional oversight in dosage. She adjusts the drops, increasing them by the smallest increment, trusting in the authority that has guided her for years. Relief returns temporarily, but the body's subtle unrest continues, undiminished in its quiet insistence. Each intervention is accepted as necessary, rationalized as careful management. Yet with each recurrence, the body asserts its autonomy, reminding her, softly, that it is not entirely governed by routine or tincture. The revolt is private, intimate, impossible to display in drawing rooms or parlors. Servants do not perceive it, visitors cannot detect it. It is felt in a pulse, a sigh, a faint tension in a wrist or shoulder, yet its presence is undeniable to the woman herself. It challenges the illusion of control, forcing her to recognize that composure, once taken for granted, requires constant maintenance. The body will not yield entirely to expectation, propriety, or chemistry. It retains a voice, subtle but persistent, and in this quiet rebellion lies an unspoken truth. The very system designed to preserve composure, to maintain appearances, and to ensure continuity has also awakened resistance. Dependence, gradual and imperceptible, has transformed the body into a participant in its own management. Relief is now anticipated, demanded, and negotiated, even as it is provided. The revolt is not defiance in the conventional sense, it is insistence that the body's needs be recognized, that it retain its autonomy even within the soft confines of obedience. Thus, the body asserts itself gently, silently, persistently. It reminds the woman that no ritual, no drops, no carefully cultivated calm can entirely suppress its will. Composure remains, appearances are maintained, but beneath the surface, the body is neither passive nor entirely compliant. It is alive, insisting, remembering, and quietly revolting against the life that has been imposed upon it, measured drop by measured drop. The parlor is set, the tea poured, the afternoon unfolding with the gentle insistence of routine. In these rooms, the presence of men is polite, reserved, and highly observant, yet always governed by expectation. Husbands in the Gilded Age, while afforded authority, are equally bound by decorum. They prefer harmony, predictability, and above all, calm. The slightest hint of agitation or distress in their wives is noted, but rarely questioned, for propriety demands silence and composure. Relief, when chemically assisted, becomes a welcome mediator in the household. He does not demand understanding. He does not inquire about the sources of fatigue, the tremors of nerves, the hidden sorrows. He prefers them softened, diluted, removed from immediate perception. A few measured drops of laudanum transform the restless hands, the furrowed brow, the quiet sighs into the serene composure that society expects and he desires. Calm becomes not merely desirable, it becomes necessary, the lubricant of domestic tranquility, the invisible oil that ensures conversation flows and duties proceed without interruption. The body, trained by years of expectation and subtle chemical guidance, complies with remarkable efficiency. Nerves that might otherwise reveal unrest are dulled, tremors and palpitations are muted, anxiety is softened into acquiescence. Each administered dose is a guarantee that the household will continue uninterrupted, that social appearances will be maintained, and that the husband need not confront the private turmoil of the woman who fulfills his domestic expectations with meticulous grace. The reliance upon calm is reinforced by praise and approval. He notices her composure, remarks upon it with gentle commendation, and reinforces the notion that the maintenance of tranquility is virtuous. "You seem well rested," he observes, noting no irony, asking no questions. The satisfaction is mutual. She is relieved that her dependency goes unchallenged. He is reassured that the household's delicate equilibrium remains undisturbed. The amber liquid, quietly administered and carefully measured, facilitates this silent accord. Yet the consequence of this preference is subtle but profound. The woman learns that her value, her acceptance, and her social and domestic standing are intimately tied to the illusion of control. Her compliance becomes a performance, her relief a currency, her composure a shield. The body and mind learn to anticipate intervention, to expect chemical moderation before any emotional unrest can be perceived. The drops are taken not solely for personal comfort, but as a strategic measure to ensure harmony and to preserve the husband's contentment. Other domestic actors, the servants and children, internalize this preference as well. They move quietly through the house, aware of the timing and administration of relief, adjusting their own movements and expectations to avoid disruption. The house itself, attuned to these rhythms, seems to absorb the pattern, reinforcing the subtle choreography of composure and concealment. The family unit operates seamlessly, outwardly perfect, internally governed by unspoken rituals of chemical moderation. Over time, this system becomes habitual. The body adapts, nerves anticipate, and dependence consolidates itself in a manner so subtle that it escapes notice. The husband, content with the calm he observes, never probes, never questions, never perceives the soft erosion of autonomy that accompanies the amber liquid. His preference shapes the household as profoundly as the medicine itself, guiding behavior, expectation, and the very rhythm of daily life. Thus, calm is preserved, sustained, and demanded, not only by medicine, but by social contract. Husbands who prefer tranquility reinforce dependency without intending to, creating a quiet pact. Composure in exchange for approval, submission masked as elegance, relief administered and maintained in silence. The household prospers in appearance, the parlor gleams with perfection, and the woman, though reliant upon drops she no longer questions, continues to move gracefully through the carefully curated world that expects nothing less than serenity at all times. A smile is a thing of great power in the drawing rooms of the Gilded Age. It signals grace, composure, and good breeding. It reassures the visitor, pacifies the household, and maintains the rhythm of polite conversation. Yet, beneath the arch of the lips, behind the steady gaze and the carefully modulated tones, a subtle absence begins to take shape, a quiet hollow where feeling once resided. The body and mind, conditioned by repeated reliance upon laudanum, have learned to present composure even as their vitality diminishes. It is imperceptible to the casual observer. The visitor praises the charm of the hostess, noting the clarity of her speech, the ease with which she moves from topic to topic, the warmth that seems to shine through polite gestures. Yet the tremor in her hand, the slight slackening of posture, the distant glimmer in her eyes, these are invisible to those who expect only propriety. The medicine has softened the edges of perception, muffled the discordant signals, and ensured that the absence behind the smile remains undiscovered. The woman herself becomes acutely aware of the difference. She knows in quiet moments that the pleasure she displays is not fully felt, that laughter is measured and deliberate, that joy is constrained by the necessity of appearance. Chemical calm has dulled the extremes of emotion, trading the depth of feeling for the smooth consistency of composure. She smiles because she must, because expectation dictates, because the drops ensure that it is possible to do so without faltering. Even private moments are touched by this absence. In the quiet of her chambers, when letters lie unsent and reflections linger, she senses the gap between the self she presents and the self she experiences. The body, trained to expect relief, demands the tincture before discomfort becomes visible. The mind, conditioned by habit, refrains from dwelling too long on sorrow or longing, knowing that the amber liquid will restore calm if needed. Emotion is deferred, reduced to a manageable gradient, a background hum beneath the polished exterior. Visitors, husbands, children, and servants participate unknowingly in maintaining this illusion. Their expectations, their comfort, their desire for harmony reinforce the necessity of the smile, the measured laugh, the gentle tone. Any flicker of raw sentiment is quickly subdued, either by habit, by chemical intervention, or by social caution. The woman's experience is filtered through layers of expectation, medication, and propriety until the absence behind the smile becomes a constant companion. The paradox is subtle and insidious. Relief, once the goal of careful administration, has become both a tool and a constraint. Dependence is cloaked in virtue. Composure is praised, even as the body and mind soften beneath it. The very measures designed to maintain health and propriety, careful doses, measured rituals, attention to timing, ensure that the vitality of genuine feeling is dulled. The smile persists, polished and elegant, while the essence of experience recedes, unnoticed and unremarked. In this carefully curated existence, the absence behind the smile becomes a defining feature. It is neither dramatic nor catastrophic. There is no collapse, no public breakdown. There is only the quiet knowledge, deeply personal and unspoken, that emotion has been softened, that intensity has been traded for predictability, that the life she presents is partially constructed through absence. And so the woman moves among her world, smiling as expected, attending to social rituals with grace, and maintaining the smooth illusion of composure. Behind the smile lies a void, softened by amber tincture, framed by propriety and rendered invisible by the culture that prizes appearances above all else. In this space between expectation and experience, dependence grows silently, imperceptibly, and inexorably, as the absence behind the smile becomes as essential as the smile itself. In the quiet sanctums of medical scholarship, ink flows upon paper, cataloging symptoms, remedies, and theories with meticulous precision. Volumes sit in orderly stacks, their spines polished, their pages annotated with the careful hand of learned practitioners who pride themselves on observation and rigor. Yet within these pages lies a curious blindness, a moral opacity that renders invisible the lives of those whose suffering they chronicle. The women of refinement, the daughters and wives, the mothers whose nerves tremble quietly beneath silk gowns and polished manners. The journals speak in the language of diagnosis, classifying faintness, fatigue, hysteria, nervous agitation, and melancholia with clinical detachment. Symptoms are described, treatments recommended, tinctures prescribed. Laudanum, in particular, appears as a trusted tool, administered carefully in measured doses to quiet nerves and soothe distress. Its effects are recorded with precision, the physiological responses observed, the hours of sleep measured, the reports of calm noted. The science is exact, the efficacy undeniable. Yet there is a profound moral blindness embedded within this rigor. The journals rarely question the societal structures that produce these conditions. They seldom acknowledge that nerves and vapors are not merely biological phenomena, but also reflections of expectation, obligation, and restraint imposed upon women whose roles are circumscribed by decorum. Pain is catalogued but not interrogated. Dependence is observed but not understood. Treatment is evaluated, but the social context that renders it necessary remains unexamined. Women are mentioned as subjects of study, but never as agents with insight into their own experience. Their reports are filtered through the lens of propriety, their complaints softened into terminology acceptable for publication. Delicate constitution, sensitive nervous system, predisposition to imbalance. The moral dimensions of prescribing a substance with the power to induce dependence are rarely considered. The journals maintain a focus on observable outcomes, sleep, calm, stability, without grappling with the ethical implications of shaping the mind and body to meet societal expectations rather than natural need. Physicians who rely upon these texts adopt the same blindness in practice. They observe efficacy, measure dosage, note improvement in outward behavior, and conclude that treatment is sound. They may remark upon tolerance or subtle signs of escalation, but these are framed as matters of physiology rather than consequence. There is no urgency in addressing dependency, for the lives of the women involved remain background to the science. Their discomfort is managed, their appearances maintained, and their autonomy quietly constrained, yet the journals record only the triumph of calm achieved. In parlors and bedrooms, the implications unfold invisibly. Women adjust their own consumption, guided by professional authority and social expectation, rarely questioning the cumulative effects. Children observe composure as natural, servants accommodate it as routine, husbands prefer it as harmony. Each day reinforces the pattern, relief is expected, dependence normalized, suffering concealed. The moral blindness of the journals and practitioners ensures that the system continues unexamined, unquestioned, and uninterrupted. The paradox is stark. The journals, in their pursuit of understanding and care, create a framework that legitimizes concealment and chemical dependence. They measure calm, quantify rest, evaluate the temperaments of the delicate, and yet fail to perceive the ethical consequences of the interventions they codify. Their rigor is impeccable, their insight into human consequences incomplete. Thus, in the quiet libraries and offices where medical knowledge is cultivated, the lives of high society women are cataloged and studied, yet never fully acknowledged. The amber tincture flows, the nerves are soothed, the composure maintained, and the moral dimensions, Those quiet ethical questions that should accompany such intervention remain in shadow, invisible to the very hands that record and prescribe. The word itself is never spoken. It is absent from polite conversation, absent from medical journals, absent from drawing rooms where propriety governs every syllable. Yet the reality is present in every measured drop, every tremor temporarily soothed, every sigh hidden behind lace and silk. Dependence grows quietly, imperceptibly, a shadow that walks alongside the woman's daily life without announcement, without judgment, and without recognition. In the Gilded Age, addiction wears a disguise. It is carefully clothed in decorum, hidden beneath gestures of refinement and rituals of civility. The amber liquid that steadies nerves and softens sorrow is framed as medicine, precaution, care. It is prescribed by trusted physicians, dispensed by attentive chemists, and administered discreetly by the women themselves. Each administration reinforces the idea that relief is necessary, justified, and honorable. The term addiction is irrelevant because the behavior is sanctioned, approved, and repeated without overt consequence. The body, having learned the rhythm of chemical relief, begins to anticipate it. Tremors appear subtly before the prescribed hour. Restlessness surfaces during ordinary tasks. Sleep is uneasy without intervention. These signals are understood internally, acknowledged silently, and corrected immediately by measured doses. To fail to act would be to risk discomfort, exposure, or loss of composure. The lesson is reinforced repeatedly. Calm must be maintained, and dependence is the instrument of that calm. Society, too, participates in the concealment. Husbands, children, and visitors notice composure, not the tremors beneath it. Servants understand the rhythms of withdrawal and administration, adjusting their movements, their attention, and their presence accordingly. The household itself becomes a stage upon which the appearance of normalcy is performed flawlessly. The act of dependence, though real and continuous, remains invisible because the performance is convincing. Appearance substitutes for acknowledgement. Medical authority fortifies the illusion. The physician, observing the soft tremors, the restless nights, the mild signs of tolerance, adjusts prescriptions with care and precision. He frames escalation as responsiveness, not concern. He prescribes, measures, and reassures, ensuring that the practice remains consistent with social expectation and medical propriety. By never naming the underlying pattern, by never considering the possibility of dependence as an ethical issue, the authority of medicine validates the very behavior that might otherwise be questioned. In private, the woman recognizes the subtle shift in her own autonomy. She takes the drops because she has learned that she must, because the body demands them, because the mind anticipates them. She does not yet name this as addiction. It carries no stigma here, only a quiet sense of necessity. The line between choice and requirement has blurred. The habit, is internalized. Relief has become expectation. Composure is chemically mediated, social expectations preserved, and the self, though functional, is quietly constrained. There are no dramatic confrontations, no moments of revelation. Dependence, without a name, progresses invisibly. Each day reinforces the pattern, each administration normalizes it, each ritual conceals it. And because the system is approved, by society, by household, by physician, it remains beyond scrutiny. In this way, addiction exists without the language to describe it. It is chemical, social, and habitual. It is embedded in ritual, preserved by propriety, and sustained by expectation. The amber liquid continues to flow, measured, discreet, and indispensable. And though the word remains unspoken, the reality shapes life inexorably. A silent, unseen tether binding body, mind, and society together in a quiet, unacknowledged dependence. In the Gilded Age, silence is a virtue almost as prized as refinement itself. It is the measure of propriety, the assurance of decorum, the invisible currency by which social standing is maintained. To speak too openly of suffering, to reveal the tremors of nerves, the fatigue of the body, or the agitation of the mind, is to risk censure, suspicion, or the quiet withdrawal of esteem. The culture rewards discretion, patience, and endurance, and in doing so, cultivates an environment in which chemical calm is both sanctioned and expected. Women learn quickly that silence serves them. It shields them from scrutiny, protects their reputations, and preserves the illusion of composure that society prizes above all else. When nerves tighten or sorrow rises, the amber elixir of laudanum becomes both shield and confidant. Its measured drops quiet tremors, soothe agitation, and restore the appearance of balance, enabling the woman to maintain social grace without exposing vulnerability. The external world observes only the result: calm, poise, and unbroken refinement. The parlor, the drawing room, the chamber of social gathering, these spaces are theaters of propriety, carefully arranged and orchestrated. Each gesture is precise, each smile measured, each movement deliberate. Guests praise composure, remark upon serenity, and admire patience. They notice no tremor, no sigh, no whisper of fatigue. In a society that prizes appearances, the performance itself becomes the standard of evaluation. Silence is rewarded because it preserves harmony, reassures observers, and affirms the delicate order of daily life. Servants and household members participate in this quiet equilibrium, often unconsciously. They anticipate the needs of the mistress, arranging objects, adjusting light, preparing rooms to ensure uninterrupted calm. They observe the timing of tincture administration and the rhythms of retreat behind curtains or doors. The household becomes a silent collaborator in maintaining appearances, ensuring that dependence remains hidden while composure is preserved. Every subtle action reinforces the reward of silence. Even husbands and peers contribute to the pattern. Their preference for harmony, their satisfaction with calm, their polite deference to appearances all incentivize the woman to conceal distress. A quiver of the hand, a faint tremor in speech, an unguarded sigh, all must be tempered or suppressed. Calm is applauded, disturbance frowned upon. The chemical intercession of laudanum aligns perfectly with these expectations, allowing the woman to conform to social ideals while maintaining her own private equilibrium. Medical authority reinforces the structure. The physician prescribes, measures, and reassures, observing symptoms without questioning the larger pattern of reliance. He frames the administration of tincture as prudence, moderation, and care. The result is that silence is sanctioned at every level: social, domestic, and medical. The system rewards compliance, conceals unrest, and validates chemical support as a tool of propriety rather than dependence. Yet the reward comes at subtle cost. Emotional life is muted, sensations are softened, and the body gradually comes to anticipate relief rather than manage discomfort naturally. Dependence grows quietly, unnoticed, and unquestioned. The very behaviors society admires, the composure, the patience, the grace under strain, are reinforced through chemical moderation, creating a cycle that binds body, mind, and social expectation in inextricable harmony. In such a society, silence is more than discretion. It is currency, armor, and measure of worth. The amber liquid ensures that silence is maintained, that appearances remain intact, and that the world sees only the calm, composed surface. Beneath it, however, lies the quiet truth: a dependence cultivated, normalized, and rewarded, existing entirely without acknowledgement, and yet shaping life, behavior, and identity in ways no visitor, servant, or even physician fully comprehends. The first moment it happens, she does not recognize it as danger. She notices only the subtle shift. The familiar calm that once arrived effortlessly now lingers too briefly, fading like the last glow of twilight before darkness gathers fully. The bottle, which has always been a dependable companion, now seems insufficient, its contents vanishing faster than anticipated. The ritual that once guaranteed composure has been interrupted, and with that interruption, the illusion of mastery begins to fray. It is a quiet crisis, one without fanfare. The amber liquid has always promised continuity, and now continuity falters. The hands, once steady in the performance of etiquette, tremble more insistently. The chest tightens with a nervous pulse she has learned to ignore. Sleep, previously smooth and uninterrupted, arrives hesitantly, leaving restlessness in its wake. The body protests, not with dramatic collapse, but in subtle, insistent whispers that the usual measures are no longer enough. Panic is delayed by habit. She reaches for the bottle as she always has, counting drops with practiced precision, measuring them against experience and expectation. Relief comes, but the timing has shifted. The calm is temporary, fragile, and already receding before it is fully settled. She notes this inwardly, without speaking it aloud, framing it as an anomaly, a momentary lapse, rather than a harbinger of escalating dependence. Society remains unaware. The drawing rooms, the parlors, the households continue their polished rhythm. Visitors remark on composure, servants accommodate quietly, husbands remain satisfied with the outward appearance of grace. All eyes see stability. The subtle distress of the body, the anticipation of relief, the trembling that signals reliance, are invisible. The household operates flawlessly, maintained by disciplined discretion and the amber tincture. Yet the woman herself senses the shift. She feels the body's impatience, the subtle urgency, the increasing insistence that calm be restored. It is no longer entirely a choice. It is expectation. She recognizes dimly that the body has begun to demand what once was offered as optional relief. Every hour without the measured drops becomes more difficult to endure. The amber liquid, once sufficient in small, occasional doses, must now be applied with careful timing and increasing attention. The physician, when consulted, treats the change with gentle adjustment. He frames it as responsiveness, as prudence, as fine-tuning, rather than escalation. The tolerance that is developed is acknowledged without alarm, measured and corrected. The authority of medicine legitimizes the need for increased frequency, obscuring the subtle encroachment of dependence from both patient and observer. The lesson is clear. The body's shifting demands are acceptable, manageable, and to be met without question. In private, the woman begins to track the hours, the doses, the moments when calm wanes. She learns to anticipate, to measure, to intervene before agitation surfaces. The practice, once casual, becomes structured, regimented, indispensable. Dependence, though invisible to the household and invisible to society, consolidates itself with every careful administration. The bottle is no longer merely relief, it has become necessity, its emptying a signal of urgency, its presence a measure of survival. Thus, the crisis, subtle as it is, teaches a powerful lesson. Calm is fragile, control is conditional, and what once arrived effortlessly now requires vigilance, precision, and unspoken acknowledgement. The amber tincture remains both companion and master, shaping days, regulating nerves, and quietly ensuring that dependence, once nascent, continues its quiet, inescapable growth. Desperation arrives softly, without the clamor of alarm or accusation. It does not announce itself in dramatic collapse or public spectacle. It settles instead as a subtle insistence, a quiet pressure beneath silk skirts and behind embroidered gloves. The body trembles with need, the pulse quickens with anticipation, and the mind, conditioned by habit and expectation, registers urgency without recognizing it as such. And yet, the exterior remains composed, dignified, polished, and carefully restrained. The woman, aware of the shift, addresses it as she always has, with measured precision and discretion. She reaches for the bottle, the amber liquid that has become both ally and requirement. The act is deliberate, almost ritualistic. Drops fall into a glass, diluted with water or wine, stirred with care. Relief arrives slowly, permeating the nerves, softening the tremor, easing the ache that had begun to assert itself too loudly. Calm returns, and with it, the performance resumes. The smile, the gentle tilt of the head, the poised hand, each gesture is restored as though desperation had never existed. Yet the mind knows better. It recognizes the fragility of the calm, the tenuousness of composure, the way relief is now not merely desirable, but demanded. What once was occasional, measured, optional, has become habitual, anticipated, necessary. The body has learned its lesson, having endured repeated cycles of tension and release, and it now insists on continuation. The mind acquiesces, framing the need as rational, appropriate, even virtuous. There is dignity in obedience, in measured intervention, in the quiet correction of bodily unrest. In society, this performance is indistinguishable from composure. Visitors comment on serenity. Husbands observe attentiveness. Servants move seamlessly to accommodate. The outward appearance is flawless. No one questions the underlying urgency, the quiet revolt of the body, or the growing dependence that sustains the performance. All that is visible is the calm, the ease, the polished grace expected of a woman of refinement. The duality is subtle but profound. Desperation, once raw and visible, is transmuted into dignity through careful administration and habitual control. Chemical intervention provides the means. Propriety provides the framework. Together, they shape a life in which need is met, appearances are maintained, and the growing reliance remains invisible. The body is soothed, the mind reassured, and society perceives only the results: composure uninterrupted, duty fulfilled, presence maintained. Even in private, the woman negotiates the fine line between necessity and discretion. She monitors the subtle signals of unrest, anticipates the moment when calm will waver, and intervenes preemptively. The act of taking the medicine becomes both strategy and ritual, a demonstration of self-discipline disguised as compliance with the body's subtle demands. Relief is no longer a reaction. It is a continuous process, administered with care to preserve dignity, protect reputation, and maintain appearances. The paradox is inescapable. The very act that ensures grace and composure simultaneously reinforces dependence. Desperation, though effectively hidden, shapes behavior, dictates attention, and regulates the day-to-day existence of the woman who must appear unaffected. Every measured drop preserves the illusion. Every moment of calm masks the quiet urgency, and every smile conceals the private negotiation between body, mind, and amber elixir. Thus, in the drawing rooms of the Gilded Age, desperation is never seen, never named, yet it is always present, softly disguised as dignity, silently maintained by habit, authority, and chemical intercession, ensuring that composure persists even as dependence deepens, unacknowledged and inexorable. For years, the physician's visits have been predictable, his authority unquestioned, his judgment absolute. He observes, measures, and prescribes with the quiet confidence that has guided countless women through delicate constitutions and frayed nerves. His hand is steady, his tone gentle, and his instructions are received without doubt. Yet even the most seasoned practitioner, trained in the art of observation and tempered by experience, can reach a moment of hesitation, a subtle uncertainty when the patterns he has long managed begin to suggest consequences previously unconsidered. It begins with small observations. The same patient requires slightly more tincture to achieve the familiar calm. The tremors return sooner. Sleep, once effortless, demands increased intervention. These changes, while individually unremarkable, accumulate. The physician notes them quietly, without comment, compiling data in his mind and in the margins of his ledger. The increases in dosage are minor, the response is still within expected parameters, yet a whisper of doubt emerges. What is the long-term effect of sustained dependence, even when appearances remain immaculate? He hesitates, though he does not yet question the propriety of administration. His pause is subtle, a recalibration of certainty rather than a confrontation with error. He observes the woman with a keener eye, noting the delicate pallor of her skin, the faint tremor beneath her gloves, the slight rigidity of posture that even the amber liquid cannot fully soften. He considers the trajectory of her care, recalling other cases, comparing timelines, weighing doses. The ledger entries begin to carry more than measurement, they carry the faintest echo of concern. The hesitation is amplified by context. The Gilded Age prizes composure above all else. Public collapse is shunned, visible dependence is scandalous. The physician is caught between duty and discretion, between professional assurance and the emerging awareness that treatment may be reshaping the patient more profoundly than previously acknowledged. To intervene aggressively would draw attention. To ignore the subtle warning signs might permit harm. In the balance, he chooses caution, adjusting doses only incrementally, continuing the familiar ritual while acknowledging internally that the pattern is no longer entirely predictable. The woman senses nothing of this hesitation. Her reliance is unbroken, her expectation unaltered. She continues the routine with practiced precision, taking the amber drops at measured intervals, retreating behind closed doors when necessary, performing composure flawlessly in parlors and drawing rooms. The chemical calm masks uncertainty, and the illusion of normalcy is preserved. The physician's pause, subtle and internal, is as invisible to her as the gradual reshaping of dependence that has taken root. In private, he debates the ethics quietly, weighing the necessity of relief against the unseen cost. He considers withdrawal, reduction, counsel, but he is constrained by social expectations, by propriety, by the expectation that calm must be maintained at all costs. Intervention risks disruption, compliance preserves harmony. The paradox is acute. To act decisively could expose vulnerability, yet to continue might allow dependency to deepen. He hesitates, observing, calculating, aware that the amber tincture that has preserved composure also conceals a quiet erosion of autonomy. And so the routine persists. The drops are administered, the nerves are soothed, the appearance of composure endures. The physician's hesitation remains unspoken, a silent acknowledgement of the delicate boundary between care and consequence. He continues his rounds, steady in demeanor, yet internally attuned to the subtle revolt of the body, the quiet insistence of dependence, and the fragile balance of appearances. In this unacknowledged tension, the life of the patient continues, composed on the surface, profoundly altered beneath, guided by authority, habit, and a hesitating hand that finally glimpses, however faintly, the cost of sustained calm. There comes a moment when curiosity, courage, or desperation compels the woman to question the very ritual that has governed her life for years. The bottle, once a source of calm and assurance, begins to feel less like comfort and more like constraint. She wonders what it might mean to refuse, to allow the body to endure its natural rhythm, to confront sensation without the amber intercession that has long guided her days and nights. The thought is tentative at first, like a faint breeze stirring the curtains, but it carries with it a weight that cannot be ignored. She begins cautiously, reducing the dose by a few drops, delaying administration slightly, or skipping a midday ritual entirely. At first, the difference is subtle. The hands tremble faintly, the chest tightens just a fraction, and the nerves stir with awareness that has long been muted. Sleep, once reliably smooth, arrives with slight resistance, leaving traces of wakefulness in the early hours of the morning. These are small perturbations, manageable in isolation, but they mark the beginning of an awakening the body has long resisted. The mind responds with a mixture of fear and fascination. She measures each sensation, recording internally what emerges in the absence of chemical calm. Anxiety is sharper, fatigue more pronounced, emotions less dulled. There's a raw immediacy to experience that has been absent for years, a clarity that is as startling as it is uncomfortable. The body, accustomed to obedience, protests, reminding her that the calm she has relied upon has become expectation. Each muscle, each pulse, each fleeting tremor whispers that the ritual was not merely indulgence, it was necessity. Social life continues around her, indifferent to the internal struggle. Guests arrive, conversation flows, the household operates as before. Outwardly, she performs composure flawlessly. The faint traces of internal unrest are invisible to all but herself. Her smile remains steady, her gestures controlled, her voice calm. Yet beneath the exterior, the tension is unmistakable, a delicate balancing act between self-will and learned dependence. Attempts to resist are not simple. The body remembers the cycles of relief, anticipates intervention, and insists upon it with subtle but undeniable pressure. Tremors grow more insistent, agitation rises unbidden, and sleep becomes intermittent. Even moments of reflection, which once offered quiet insight, are overshadowed by the urgent, pressing demands of a system that has been conditioned for years. Each lapse in chemical assistance is met with a body that protests without drama, a mind that senses danger, and nerves that demand attention. The paradox is acute. In seeking autonomy, she discovers how thoroughly dependence has been internalized. Relief, once optional, now seems necessary. Calm, once chosen, now feels imposed. Strength, once innate, feels contingent upon ritual. Every attempt to stop is tempered by the fear of failure, the dread of social exposure, and the deeply ingrained habit of compliance. Yet in this struggle, there is clarity. She glimpses the structure of her own reliance, the subtle architecture of expectation and habit, the ways in which propriety, authority, and chemistry have shaped her life. The attempt to cease, though incomplete, illuminates the quiet truth. Calm has been purchased, control has been ceded, and the body, trained over years, will resist freedom even as it is offered. And so she continues, poised and dignified, balancing on the precipice between autonomy and dependency, aware for the first time of the tenuous line she has walked for so long and of the cost hidden behind the elegance of her everyday performance. The body, unlike the mind, keeps meticulous record. It does not forget the rhythm of relief, the steady pulse of reassurance, the amber warmth that once flowed through veins and nerves. Even as consciousness wanders, distracted by conversation, duty, or decorum, the body remembers. Every dose, every tremor soothed, every sigh quieted is encoded in subtle signals, muscle memory, nerve sensitivity, a quiet expectation that calm will arrive precisely when needed. Memory here is not reflective, it is functional, biological, absolute. When the woman attempts to step away from the ritual, the body asserts itself with the precision of recollection. A slight ache blooms where tension was once suppressed. The pulse quickens before worry has fully formed. Tremors, faint but persistent, appear in hands, wrists, or shoulders. Even posture betrays recognition. The spine stiffens, the chest tightens, the head tilts slightly forward, anticipating intervention. Each reaction is subtle, imperceptible to outsiders, yet undeniable to the self who has been conditioned to feel its cues. Sleep is particularly instructive. Nights once smooth now demand negotiation. The mind drifts toward slumber, but the body hesitates. Muscles remain taut, pulse irregular, nerves alert despite the quiet of the room. The amber elixir, when administered, restores the accustomed pattern. Without it, the body recalls every hour of restlessness, every moment of vigilance it endured in the absence of chemical calm. The memory of relief shapes expectation, creating a cycle in which dependence is internalized long before conscious acknowledgement occurs. This memory is impartial and unsentimental. It recalls not only the moments of comfort, but also the quiet tension of anticipation, the subtle agitation that arises when the next dose is delayed, the faint anxiety that accompanies the slightest disruption of ritual. The body keeps ledger-like account of all sensations, measuring, comparing, and adjusting with exacting consistency. It recognizes patterns, forecasts demand, and signals insistently when equilibrium is threatened. Even in public, the body exercises its quiet authority. Gestures are carefully controlled, movements are precise, composure is maintained. Yet the internal ledger does not rest. Each minute without intervention is noted, each demand suppressed, each subtle imbalance recorded. The body's memory functions as both guide and master, orchestrating behavior, signaling need, and enforcing reliance without fanfare or accusation. Social expectations amplify this recollection. Husbands, children, servants, and visitors all respond to the outward appearance of calm, reinforcing the importance of maintaining the illusion. The body learns that calm is not merely chemical, but also performative. To falter, even briefly, risks exposure. Therefore, memory and habit intertwine. The body recalls the necessity of relief and shapes behavior to ensure that appearances remain intact. In quiet moments, the woman senses this memory, though she cannot name it fully. A shiver of anticipation, a subtle tension, a brief restlessness, these are traces of what the body has stored. She obeys reflexively, reaches for the bottle, administers the measured drops, and restores the calm that the body anticipates. Each action reinforces the memory, deepening the pattern, confirming the necessity, and binding the self more tightly to the ritual she has long depended upon. Thus, the body remembers everything. It recalls relief, anticipates need, and enforces dependence with unerring consistency. It is silent, relentless, and absolute, a ledger of sensation that governs daily life, shaping both habit and expectation, ensuring that chemical calm remains not only desired, but indispensable, and that the woman moves perpetually within the invisible architecture of her own conditioned obedience. Shame arrives quietly, without spectacle, yet it possesses a gravity that weighs more heavily than any visible restraint. It is neither loud nor abrupt. It infiltrates the mind slowly, insinuating itself between thoughts and gestures, seeping into the spaces where composure is expected and independence once resided. In the Gilded Age, where propriety dictates every movement and expectation shapes every interaction, shame functions as a second prison, invisible yet inescapable, confining the body and mind as completely as any physical barrier. The woman knows in the private recesses of her consciousness that dependence has taken root. She has learned through years of chemical relief, through repeated cycles of calm and anticipation, that her body cannot endure as it once did without intervention. Tremors, restlessness, fatigue, and agitation are all contained, managed, and softened, yet they exist nonetheless. Each administration of laudanum reinforces reliance, yet each moment of quiet reinforces the subtle recognition that she is no longer wholly autonomous. The knowledge of this reliance brings a deep, unspoken shame. Shame is compounded by visibility. In drawing rooms, parlors, and social gatherings, the woman must perform grace, poise, and composure flawlessly. The slightest slip, a tremor in the hand, a hesitation in conversation, a moment of fatigue, risks exposure. Society is vigilant, even when polite, observing the polished surface without perceiving the hidden architecture that maintains it. The pressure to appear impeccable transforms necessity into discretion, and discretion into concealment. Each day of outward calm becomes a reinforcement of the inner acknowledgement that without chemical aid, the performance would fail. This prison of shame operates silently but powerfully. It discourages inquiry and reflection, muting curiosity about the body's signals or the mind's unrest. It frames dependence not as consequence, but as secret failure, something to be hidden and managed, never spoken aloud. The woman obeys reflexively, administering the tincture before tension fully manifests, retreating behind closed doors, smoothing each gesture and expression with meticulous care. Every act of concealment reinforces the prison, making the walls more subtle, more absolute. Even intimacy offers no escape. Within the household, she may share rooms, meals, and conversation, but the inner recognition of reliance remains secret. Husbands, servants, and family are unaware, and their ignorance amplifies the pressure. She must maintain composure for them, ensuring that calm is perceived as natural, not chemically supported. Dependence becomes a private truth, confined to her awareness, weighted with the unspoken knowledge that revelation would be both humiliating and socially disastrous. Medical authority compounds the effect. The physician, though attentive and gentle, frames the amber tincture as proper care, as attentive management. There is no acknowledgement that reliance might be problematic. There's only affirmation that calm is virtuous, expected, and socially necessary. His approval reassures while also reinforcing shame. The reassurance that dependence is justified comes hand in hand with the realization that reliance is inevitable and invisible. The body, trained to anticipate and demand relief, and the mind, trained to comply discreetly, conspire to make the shame unrelenting. Chemical calm may quiet nerves and soothe fatigue, but it cannot release the weight of self-conscious awareness that arises from understanding one's own compromised autonomy. In this second prison, she remains always alert, always measured, always composed. Each smile, each gesture, each word is polished and deliberate. Yet beneath the surface lies the persistent echo of reliance and the quiet knowledge that, for all appearances, she is bound, not by social expectation alone, nor by propriety, but by the invisible walls of shame that grow heavier with every administered drop. The city is abuzz with the rhetoric of reform. Newspapers herald progress, medical societies convene with earnest determination, and philanthropists lecture on the moral and physical betterment of society. New codes of conduct, hygiene, and decorum are proposed. Lectures extol moderation, virtue, and self-discipline. Yet beneath the lofty ideals and public declarations, the reality of private lives remains stubbornly unaltered, particularly for the women whose nerves, fatigue, and sorrow have been quietly soothed by amber tincture for years. Public reform addresses visibility and morality, but it cannot penetrate the private mechanisms of dependence that preserve the appearance of propriety. Women observe the discourse with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. They read of reforms intended to preserve health, encourage self-control, and protect moral character. Lectures on moderation caution against indulgence, and social commentary praises restraint. Yet for those whose days are guided by the careful administration of laudanum, the warnings feel distant, theoretical, almost abstract. The reforms are for others, for the lower classes, for those whose suffering is public, for those whose needs cannot be concealed behind lace curtains and polished manners. Her own reliance remains invisible, sanctioned, even discreetly reinforced by propriety and medical authority. Still, awareness creeps in quietly. As reformers speak of the dangers of indulgence and the moral perils of excess, a shadow of doubt passes across the mind. She wonders whether her own habits, her own secret reliance, would withstand scrutiny. Could the careful performance of composure, the polished rituals of calm, survive public judgment? These thoughts linger, unspoken, as she performs the duties of her station, welcoming visitors, entertaining guests, attending to the household, maintaining smiles and gestures that suggest mastery of self. The paradox deepens in private. The same drops that preserve composure also reinforce the very dependence that reform seeks to eradicate in principle. Each administration of laudanum ensures calm, yet each administration reminds the body and mind that autonomy is limited. The ritual of relief, once reassuring, now functions as both shield and chain, protection against public scrutiny, yet evidence of private submission to chemical control. The woman experiences stability, yes, but stability purchased at the cost of unacknowledged dependence. Even the most subtle reform efforts, discussions of moderation, advice on self-discipline, medical recommendations, cannot penetrate the private systems she has developed. Friends, family, and servants see only the outward composure, interpreting each graceful gesture as evidence of virtue and diligence. The public ideal of moderation aligns curiously with private reality. Calm is maintained, appearances preserved, and reliance remains carefully hidden. Yet the alignment is a fragile one, precarious, and contingent. The body, trained through repeated cycles of relief, continues to expect intervention. Fatigue, tremor, and restless nerves signal the necessity of drops long before thought intervenes. The mind acquiesces, suppressing curiosity and reflection, allowing the pattern to persist unchallenged. While the city debates reform, she lives within the quiet architecture of dependence, governed by habit, expectation, and chemical assurance. Thus, public reform and private ruin exist side by side. Society praises virtue, self-control, and composure, while the mechanisms that preserve these qualities privately, drops measured with care, rituals observed meticulously, and habits reinforced, ensure that dependence continues unabated. The woman's life is a testament to the paradox of the Gilded Age. The surface gleams with propriety and order, while beneath lies a carefully concealed structure of reliance, quietly deepening, unnoticed and unchallenged, preserved behind curtains, gloves, and the amber glow of a private elixir. Even in the world of elegance and refinement, some women never find release. They are the ones who, once caught in the quiet cycles of chemical calm and social expectation, remain bound indefinitely, their lives shaped entirely by the rhythm of dependency. For them, laudanum is no longer a tool of occasional relief or measured indulgence. It is the scaffold upon which every day, every gesture, and every thought is constructed. Escape is neither imagined nor possible. The pattern is too deeply ingrained, the routine too seamless, the body too conditioned to function otherwise. These women move through their houses like shadows of themselves, inhabiting the spaces they have mastered with precision while relying on intervention to preserve the illusion of vitality. Their hands are steady, their smiles polite, their movements graceful, but beneath the surface, nerves quiver, muscles stiffen, and the pulse carries the quiet insistence of a body that has grown accustomed to being soothed. They perform the roles demanded by society flawlessly, yet the calm they project is always borrowed, never innate. Each gesture, each word, each expression is mediated by habit and chemical assistance. In their private chambers, the amber elixir waits like a silent sentinel. Every morning, afternoon, and evening is governed by its presence, measured meticulously, administered with precision. The body anticipates it, the mind acquiesces, and the routine persists. Withdrawal, whether deliberate or accidental, brings a subtle revolt, tremors, restlessness, anxiety, sleeplessness. Relief returns only through intervention, confirming the permanence of dependence and the impossibility of living without it. The ones who never escaped have internalized this cycle to the extent that autonomy is no longer a choice, but a distant memory. Their lives, while outwardly successful and socially commendable, are quietly constrained. They cannot risk deviation, cannot allow the body to experience discomfort without chemical assistance. Even minor disruptions, a delayed visit from the physician, a miscounted dose, a guest who overstays, become sources of acute unease, signaling to the body that vigilance is required, that the cycle must continue uninterrupted. The house, attuned to these rhythms, accommodates silently. Closed doors, soft lighting, prepared furnishings. The household itself becomes complicit, preserving appearances while enabling reliance. Social perception remains unblemished. Friends admire composure. Husbands trust in refinement. Visitors are reassured by elegance and grace. No one perceives the private tether that binds these women to their routine. The pattern of dependency is invisible, cloaked in the very virtues society prizes: patience, endurance, and poise. The more seamlessly they perform, the more completely their reliance is concealed. Escape is rendered impossible not by chains, but by expectation, habit, and the quiet authority of chemical calm. Yet, even in this quiet captivity, there's a subtle knowledge that lingers. The body remembers all. The tremors before the drops, the anxiety between doses, the way calm must be maintained at all costs. The mind, though disciplined, occasionally notes the cost, the faint awareness that independence is diminished, that reliance has become absolute, that freedom has been quietly surrendered. But these thoughts are fleeting, overpowered by habit and necessity. The ones who never escaped live in this paradox, endlessly capable and entirely dependent, socially impeccable and privately constrained, graceful in appearance and bound by invisible necessity. Their lives are testimony to the delicate cruelty of expectation and propriety, to the unacknowledged power of chemical calm, and to the quiet, inexorable reality that some patterns, once begun, cannot be undone. The annals of society are precise in their omissions. Newspapers chronicle marriages, births, deaths. Journals catalog illnesses and remedies. Diaries record social engagements and charitable acts. Yet they remain curiously silent on the truths that matter most to the women of refinement whose lives were quietly structured by dependence. What the records do not say is vast. The trembling hand behind the lace glove, the restless night softened by amber tincture, the private negotiation between body, mind, and chemical calm that preserved composure in a world that demanded it. Medical journals report symptoms with meticulous detail: palpitations, fainting, hysteria, melancholy. Treatments are listed, prescriptions measured, results recorded. Yet the context of lived experience is almost entirely absent. The relentless social pressure, the expectation of constant grace, the subtle coercion of propriety, all of this remains unmentioned. The texts note compliance, obedience, and outward calm, but they never document the internal struggle, the private rituals, the quiet, invisible dependence that shaped every gesture and controlled every expression. Social registers are equally silent. Invitations extended, gowns admired, charitable works praised, These are recorded in exquisite detail, the surface polished to perfection. But there is no acknowledgement of the faint tremors that preceded a curtsy, the restless sighs hidden behind polite smiles, or the moments when a hand brushed hastily over a fan to conceal an unsteady pulse. The meticulous bookkeeping of appearances ensures that the world sees only elegance, while the underlying currents of reliance remain uncharted, undocumented, and unspoken. Even private letters and journals, when preserved, seldom betray their truths. They contain carefully crafted narratives, often written with an eye toward propriety, for future readers or posterity. Personal reflections are softened, grievances masked by decorum, anxieties filtered through language acceptable to social norms. The amber liquid, so central to maintaining equilibrium, is rarely acknowledged explicitly. Its influence is implied only in the fleeting references to nerves, fatigue, or delicate constitution. The records thus create an illusion that life proceeded smoothly, effortlessly, and without dependence. The cost of this silence is profound. History, for all its detail, overlooks the private realities that defined these women's lives. It fails to capture the intricate architecture of their daily existence, the way composure was chemically maintained, the subtle rituals that ensured social harmony at the expense of autonomy. The achievements and appearances recorded in ink are inseparable from the hidden labor of compliance, the quiet endurance of body and mind, structured around a dependence that cannot be named, only inferred. The irony is striking. The very systems designed to document, to preserve, to understand, systematically erase the realities they aim to commemorate. Society praises virtue, elegance, and fortitude while remaining blind to the methods that sustain them. In doing so, it legitimizes the practices it ignores, perpetuating a cycle in which appearances matter more than truths, and in which chemical calm becomes both necessity and secret. For the women who lived behind this veil, the records offer no recognition, no acknowledgement of struggle, no witness to the delicate negotiations that governed every day. Their lives are cataloged only in absence, framed by what is recorded and overshadowed by what is left unsaid. The trembling, the anticipation, the private rituals, these persist in memory and habit, yet vanish from history. And in this silence lies a quiet tragedy. The true story of composure, dependence, and endurance in the Gilded Age remains unspoken, preserved only in the private consciousness of those who lived it. The sweetness arrives with a deceptive grace. It glides across the tongue, faintly bitter beneath the perfumed syrup, yet promises comfort, calm, and reprieve. For years, it has been the constant companion of the drawing rooms, nurseries, and chambers where women navigate the unyielding expectations of the Gilded Age. It is measured, administered, and relied upon, a substance as essential to daily life as the corset that shapes the body or the lace that adorns the hands. Yet its promise is a lie, subtle, seductive, and absolute. Laudanum soothes the nerves, quiets tremors, and softens sorrow, but it does not heal. The relief it provides is temporary, a veneer of calm that masks the ongoing erosion of autonomy. Each drop dulls awareness, each administration reinforces dependence, and each ritual of consumption further embeds the body in patterns it can no longer escape. What feels like comfort is, in truth, a quiet form of captivity. The sweetness is illusory. It comforts while it binds, masks while it restrains, softens while it ensnares. The illusion is reinforced by social expectation. Guests arrive. Visitors comment on grace, husbands praise composure, and servants accommodate silently. Appearances are maintained flawlessly. The smile, the poised gesture, the gentle tilt of the head, all are preserved. The amber liquid ensures that nothing betrays the struggle beneath. Dependence remains invisible, even to the one who experiences it most intimately. Calm, achieved chemically, is mistaken for virtue, diligence, or fortitude. The sweetness deceives both observer and self. In private, the truth is unmistakable. The body anticipates relief with quiet insistence. Tremors, tension, and fatigue signal its demand. The mind, trained to acquiesce, administers the drops with ritualistic care. Sleep comes, but only as chemical sedation. Composure returns, but only as a product of intervention. Emotions are flattened, intensity softened, and the sharp edges of sensation dulled. The body remembers every dose, every tremor, every subtle revolt, and in that memory, dependence consolidates itself. The sweetness has promised serenity, yet delivers both relief and constraint. Even awareness of the deceit is muted. The woman may recognize the pattern, notice the escalating need, sense the subtle erosion of natural endurance. But the chemical calm silences alarm, dulls reflection, and smooths hesitation. Each intervention reinforces obedience, making questioning feel unnecessary, even disloyal to the routine that preserves her life and social standing. The lie is complete because it has been internalized. The body and mind act in concert to sustain it. The irony of the Gilded Age is manifest in this deception. Society praises composure, virtue, and refinement, yet the very qualities it admires are sustained through artifice and chemical intervention. Respectability masks dependence. Propriety conceals reliance. Appearances obscure the truth of endurance shaped, not by natural strength, but by amber tincture and silent habit. The sweetness is thus dual. It comforts the nerves while it ensnares the body. It preserves dignity while it enforces reliance. And so life continues under the spell of this quiet deception. The drawing rooms remain immaculate, the smiles unwavering, the gestures polished. The household operates seamlessly, guests are reassured, and the woman herself believes in her own composure. Yet beneath it all, the truth persists. The sweetness has lied. Calm has been purchased, autonomy ceded, and the very virtue of refinement has been maintained at the cost of invisible dependence. In the Gilded Age, elegance endures. But the cost of that endurance, the hidden price, the quiet captivity, the unacknowledged truth, remains unseen, unrecorded, and unforgettable.